A night without words, soon to the next morning. After they went down the mountain, they came to the entrance of Guishu in Kunlun. Yi Tian, do you really want to enter it? I advise you to think about it again. Looking at the vitality of the ruins in Kunlun, it's like a paradise in the wind and snow. Thinking of what we saw yesterday, Yunfei says to Yi Tianshan. Kunlun Guishu is one of the 4 major Jedi in the eyes of the mountain people, and is almost on the way to the position of the head of the Jedi. Under such circumstances, she is very worried about what unknown danger Yi Tian will encounter when he enters it. At that time, everything will be in trouble. I've made up my mind. Don't worry. I'll be careful. Leaf Day hears a sound, looking at Cloud Fei to smile, calmly. It's dangerous to return to the ruins of Kunlun, but after all, there are natural Lingyu in it. Not only that, return to the ruins of Kunlun is just a starting point for him to explore. Since the arrivals have paid attention to these Jedi, then he has to take the lead to explore these secret places. After a word falls, Yi Tian cast his eyes on Niafu. Master, don't worry, I will protect Miss Yun well. Niafu doesn't wait for Yi Tian to open his mouth, then he looks respectful and says respectfully to Yi Tiangong. You'd better be able to do what you said, otherwise, with the pill you took, even if I fell in the ruins of Kunlun, as long as you dare to do what I didn't ask you to do, erysipelas will still attack and make your heart and lungs die. Yi Tian nodded slightly, dropped the sentence, followed closely, and went to Kunlun Guishu. Niafu looks at Yi Tian's back and looks pale. In fact, she really has some careful thoughts in her heart. She thinks that if Yi Tian can fall into the ruins of Kunlun, she will be free. From then on, she will be free from the bondage of Yi Tian and the bondage of the Comer, and can live freely on the earth. But where can she think of it? The pill that Yi Tian gave her is so treacherous and unpredictable. Even if Yi Tian's body falls, it can still be limited. Although she has doubts about Yi Tian's words in her heart, she still can't help shivering and dare not try when she thinks of the prestige of Emperor Dan. At this time, Yi Tian was already marching towards the ruins of Kunlun. What a mess of vitality. As soon as he stepped into the valley, Yi Tian immediately felt that the vitality of the world around him was as chaotic as if it were tangled. Not only that, these vitality of the world were not only scattered, but also had a strong hostility to foreign entrance. Not good, just for a breath, Yi Tian immediately sensed that there was a kind of violent chi on his left side, which seemed to be condensing. Without any hesitation, he quickly opened the source eye, and at the same time, he took a step forward to avoid. Click. Almost at the same time when he was walking, along the left side of his body, suddenly there was a bright electricon flying out, whistling with terror, and slashing heavily at Yi Tian. The sharp one seemed to cut his body into 2 parts in a flash. Lay me. Almost at the same time, Yi Tianshan raised his hand, and a thunderbolt flew out of the sky and hit hard at the lightning. In a twinkling of an eye, the two mingled, and the thunderbolt suddenly broke into pieces and scattered everywhere. Wheezing. Yi Tian was relieved when he saw this, but before he could catch his breath, he suddenly found that the scattered vitality of heaven and earth, which was reflected by Yuan Tian's eyes, suddenly became bright, and was spreading rapidly. That appearance, as if something, at this moment has been activated, is about to spread across the whole world. There is no doubt that all this is the natural field of Kunlun Guishu. After sensing that someone has entered, they want to attack and kill him, an outsider, and annihilate him. Hoo. Almost at the moment when his mood changed, a cold wind suddenly came from the front. It was as if it had blown into the bone of a madman. It made his whole body tremble madly. Not only that, but also snowflakes, like sharp blades, came out of the void in front of him. There is no doubt that once he is stabbed by the cold and incomparable snowflake, I am afraid that in a moment, his body will fall apart, turn into fine pieces, and scatter all over the world. Yi Tian. Cloud Fei is looking at this scene, involuntarily need a cold sweat for the leaf day, the losing voice exclamation way of full face concern. She clearly remembers that Chun Chang and Ma Tang were killed by this terrible blow yesterday. Now, if Yi Tian has no countermeasures, he may have to repeat their mistakes and die in this terrible place. Is she really just a friend of the master? Niafu hears Cloud Fei this, can't help but face suspicious toward her to see one eye, if only friends' words, even if care, but also care less than such degree. As a woman, she has a hunch that the relationship between Yunfei and Tian is definitely more than a friend. At least, in Yunfei's heart, I'm afraid, not only want to be Tian's friend, but for some reasons, she had to make such a decision. Fire at the same time, Tian didn't have any hesitation. He raised his hand and turned it into surging and swaying flames. He wanted to melt the snowflakes in the heaven and earth. Who? But at this time, let Tian feel incredibly extreme scene appeared. See, that cold wind seems to have the same spirit, in the moment of feeling the flames coming, cold, to the flames. In an instant, the flickering flames disappeared and turned into nothing. This cold wind has blown out my 5 elements secret skill. In this scene, Tian's heart is very creepy, and his back gives birth to a strong chill. You should know that the fire created by the 5 elements is different from the secular fire. It is more concise, and the fire is more turbulent. Water can't be poured out, and sand can't be put out. On the contrary, it will melt as a power. But now, it is blown out by this cold wind. If I didn't see this scene with my own eyes, who can believe that it would be true? Hiss. It's not just Tian, Yunfei outside the Kunlun ruins. When she saw this scene, she couldn't believe it and took a breath of air. She was in a panic. She couldn't imagine what would happen if she entered Kunlun Pass and returned to the ruins in the face of this terrible cold wind. I'm afraid that when a wind blows over, she will be turned into an ice sculpture and her life will be accounted for here, right? But in addition to the horror, she is more curious. She wants to see how Tian plans to face the fierce blow. At this time, Tian's mana was working, and Sua Wangwen's idea was turning. The original spirit fire suddenly flew out of the Dantian field and turned into 9 flames with distinct black and red colors. It circled around the body and kept walking. The cold wind carrying the snowflakes just came near and touched the fire. Suddenly, the cold wind and snowflakes that could even blow out the 5 elements were all evaporated, turned into white steam, rose and disappeared. Lord Dandi is worthy of being Lord Dandi. Even when he comes to the earth, his cultivation falls, he is still so strong. This mysterious scene, let Niafu can't help but show his admiration and praise. Lord Dante? On earth? What's wrong with your accomplishments? Yunfei was also full of praise in her heart, but at this time, when she heard Niafu's words, she couldn't help looking at her, confused. I don't know why. When she heard Niafu's words, she always felt like Niafu thought that she and Tian were not people in the world you don't know. Niafu was one Zhang, stunned of looking at Cloud Fei, Wei. What do you know? Cloud Fei frowns, the confusion in the heart, more and more rich. Niafu see this, immediately silent down, shut up no longer speak, since Tian don't say, that she naturally can't reveal the master's secret. What's going on? Tian, who is it? Seeing this, Yunfei's face became more and more confused. He felt that Tian was standing in the ruins of Kunlun. At this moment, he seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. It seemed that there were countless secrets in him. Whoosh! 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 But almost at the same time, after the cold wind and snowflakes swept all over the sky, the vitality of heaven and earth changed again. In a moment, those snowflakes, which were originally floating, suddenly condensed and turned into terrible hailstones, whistling and flying towards Tian. When the hailstones fly across the void, they make people feel that what they fly out of the void is not hail, but sharp arrows, whistling and shining, to pierce Tian's body and hole with countless blood holes. Why is Kunlun so evil? This is to turn all the people who enter into dead people, and the way of body death will disappear in it. Niafu looked at the scene in front of her. She was shocked, and her body was shaking wildly. She even couldn't help sprouting a feeling of wandering around the gate of hell. This scene made her realize that even if she didn't meet Tian and was fed the treacherous poison pill, as long as she entered Kunlun Guishu, she would be dead, either destroyed by lightning or pierced by snow and hail. Get out of my way. At this time, Tianchen murmured, and the black and red around him were out of place, but there was a kind of wonderful connection of the original spirit fire. Suddenly, like bright fireworks, countless mysterious sparks suddenly broke out and went to the hail point. When the hailstones and sparks collide with each other, those hailstones, which were originally fierce and unparalleled, like sharp to the extreme, are all vanished, evaporated, and gently swayed, then disappear into the sky and completely disappear into nothingness. Buzz. 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 But almost at the same time when the hailstones disappeared, Tian immediately felt that the ground under his feet, at this moment, was shaking wildly, as if the earth dragon was going to split up, cracking cracks and engulfing Tian. Even, at the same time of shaking, along the ground, there appeared one after another ferocious cracks. Even, the cracks are constantly expanding and growing. It seems that as long as a few breath, they will crack to the point where they can swallow a big living person. Click whoosh boom. At the same time when the ground cracked, the void trembled. The thunderstorms, gales and hailstones that had just disappeared appeared at the same time. They were intertwined and hovered in the void. If they wanted to form a terrible force, they would shoot Tian into the crack of the earth. This scene, as if the world has entered the end, so, and all kinds of extreme weather symptoms, will be linked together, bring people endless panic. No, we must find out the position of the natural spirit jade as soon as possible. Only by intercepting the natural spirit jade, can we make all this happen in front of us come to an end. Tian looks at the terrible scene like the end of the world, and his mind is full of thoughts. In this constant contact, he found that Kunlun Guishu is not only a natural field, but also a field in which many terrorist forces are constantly changing with the strength of the people who enter the valley, and then they will be promoted. Once you crack it, he will enhance it again. Under such circumstances, it is almost a dead circle. With Tian's strength, he will be defeated by this terrible power sooner or later, so that he will die here. The only solution is that he can reach the goal of entering this valley as soon as possible and find the natural Lingyu. Only in this way can he make this strange field lose the source of power, so that he can get out of it smoothly. Fire. Landslides. Water transport. Muyi. Ginger. Ray. But what he knows better is that the most important thing for him to find the position of nature's spirit jade is to get through the terrible disaster like the end of the world. Immediately, his whole body's mana runs, leading that terrible force to pass around. In a flash, along Tian's body, there are many colorful and frightening gas engines, which rush towards the vision that seems like the end of the day. They collide with each other to strike a balance between the two forces, so that they can find the chance to find the natural spirit jade. Boom! 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 In a flash, the originally quiet Kunlun ruins, at this moment, is like a terrible battlefield of modern war, a terrible roar, swept around, wandering in all directions. Even if Yunfei and Niefu stand outside the valley, this moment, cannot help but heart-shaking. There is a strong sense of uneasiness. They can't imagine what would happen at this moment if the two of them were not Tian. I'm afraid that now they have become coke, or rotten bones, scattered in the valley, and there will be no difference with those wild animals who mistakenly enter here. Only Tian, a strong man, can fight against this terrible natural field and fight his way out in Kunlun ruins. Where is the nature jade? At the same time, in the Kunlun ruins, Tian keeps fighting against the sweeping field power. At the same time, Yuantian's eyes shine all around to find the whereabouts of the natural Lingyu. Unfortunately, the surrounding rocks are all leisurely rocks, so he can't find the whereabouts of the Lingyu. No, I shouldn't look for it in this way. In this way, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even if I'm exhausted in this life, I may not be able to find it smoothly. But soon, Tian shook his head and gave up his idea. His mind was like a sea tide, constantly changing and surging. The natural field of this place is driven by the natural Lingyu. Then, when the field is stimulated, the energy of heaven and earth can provide kinetic energy for it, and the position of the natural Lingyu can be inverted. Yes, that's it. It's the simplest and the only way. After a few breaths, Tian's heart immediately gave birth to a very bold idea, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt that this method was highly feasible. But there is no doubt that this method is extremely dangerous, because we need to use the change of the vitality of heaven and earth when the field is running. The more powerful the field is, the clearer the route of the vitality of heaven and earth will be, and the more terrible the danger will be. If there is a slight mistake, it will be doomed. There is no better way than this. After pondering a little, Tian suddenly made a decision to give it a go. He knows very well that if he can't find out the position of Xingling Jade and take it out as soon as possible, then, under the endless attack of this natural field, what is waiting for him is absolutely death, without any other suspense. In that case, why not take the risk? Lay me. Thinking of this, Tian does not hesitate. He immediately runs the secret method. A thunderbolt roars down with a terrible light and bombards the front heavily. He wants to provoke this natural field and let it burst out with more powerful power, so that he can easily judge the route of the vitality of heaven and earth. What is he doing? Is he provoking the scene? Is he crazy? Outside the valley, Niafu saw the scene before her. She was almost dull. Then, in her eyes, she showed the color of worship and said, "It's really the Emperor of Dan." You know, in the face of such a field, for the idle people, it's already too scared to avoid it. But now, Tian takes the initiative to attack the field. How can this courage not be amazing? I'm afraid that in this world, only Tian, the Emperor of Dan, who was once the envy of his fellow monks, could dare to do such a bold thing. However, all of this, in addition to astonishing, is also incomprehensible to the point that they cannot understand. Tian do so, will not worry, arouse the natural field of anger, with 100 times of anger, to attack it? Click! Almost at the moment when Tian's fierce blow fell, Kunlun Guishu was like a lion who was provoked and angry. The vast expanses of void were shaking and fluctuating wildly, showing the color of dark clouds. Among them, it was a bit of golden light. In the end, the glittering golden awns gathered together and turned into a huge golden sword. The sharp light around them fell from the sky and cut off Tian's head heavily. It looked like he was going to split Tian's body into two with this terrible sword. Lay me. Seeing the fierce attack, Tian had no fear on his face. He raised his hand, and a thunder suddenly appeared. He hit the thunder sword hard. Boom! Two thunderbolts collided with each other heavily. In a flash, a terrible arc immediately spread to all directions. Moreover, the violent roar made Yunfei and Niefu feel that the earth under their feet was shaking, like an earthquake, coming. Even, they saw that in the distant mountains, the accumulated ice and snow, at this moment, was rolling down and sweeping down, and the snow powder was flying all over the sky, scattered all over the world, which made people feel a sense of fear. This kind of power is beyond Yunfei's understanding. Even Niefu, who was a practitioner, breathes cold air when he looks at this scene. His eyes toward Tian are full of bright and strange light. As a cultivator, she knows better than anyone how difficult it is for her to improve in the world of spiritual decay. Tian's ability to achieve this kind of cultivation absolutely shows that he has taken the lead and has gained a lot of opportunities in this world. And I, choosing to follow him, may be like following the Son of Fate, which will bring greater change and improvement to my life. Even, perhaps because of this opportunity, I can achieve a more powerful realm in this world than in the past. It's going to work. At the same time, after Tian extinguished the thunder, he also found that, as he speculated, when the natural field of Kunlun Guishu erupted greater power, under the eye of Yuantian, the fluctuation of the vitality that drove it to run the field became clearer at this moment. However, the time was too short. He only had time to determine the general location, and the halo had dissipated, so he could not continue to determine a more specific location. Come again. Without any hesitation, Tian raised his hand and hit Kunlun ruins with another thunder. One thunder just dissipated, and the second thunder came again. This action completely angered Kunlun Guishu. In an instant, the whole valley was shaking and trembling madly, shining from the grass and trees, from the rocks, from the depths of the soil. In the end, it turned out to be a shadow of human lightning, such as thunderstorm, which came to Tianji in one step. Human lightning! My God! Is this field going to give birth to a spirit? As soon as this scene comes out, Niefu, who is standing at the mouth of the valley and watching the situation, is almost dull. She is staring at the shining human lightning, and her brain is buzzing. Even when she is in the square-inch spiritual realm, she has never seen such a strange picture. Turned into a human form of lightning, the share of combat power, and how terrible it should be? The human lightning of baby robbery? It's not only Niefu, but Tian's face suddenly changed when he saw the lightning. Niafu couldn't recognize the human lightning, but he was once a great monk in Yupu, but he had faced a similar thunder and lightning. But at that time, he did not meet in the field, but in the natural calamity of breaking through the infant realm. Similarly, humanoid lightning is also known as the most dangerous step in the process of infant melting. When Ning Shui was in Fengsuan spirit realm, he once said that the reason why the world calls infant melting an old monster and regards it as a watershed of cultivation experts is the humanoid lightning and infant melting. Because the power of humanoid lightning is so terrible. Through the ages, the unknown friars died miserably in the hands of humanoid lightning when they passed the baby robbery. He really didn't expect that a human lightning would gather in the field of Kunlun Guishu. Although the power of this human lightning is certainly not as terrible as that of Huating robbery, it can't be underestimated. Emperor Boxing. Without any hesitation, Yi Tian's whole body mana surges and runs, pours on his fist, and strikes hard at the human lightning. In an instant, the shadow of a huge light cyan translucent hurricane smashed towards the human lightning to disperse it. Boom! But almost at the moment when the fist approached, the human lightning suddenly raised his hand, opened his 5 fingers, and squeezed the shadow of the hurricane in the palm of his hand. Then, with a click, the shadow of the hurricane suddenly disintegrated, turned into many pieces, and disappeared in all parts of the world. What? What a powerful force! As soon as this scene appeared, Yi Tian's eyes suddenly shrank, feeling a strong crisis. He just hit, but mobilized all the strength of the 8th floor of the cave. Such an attack can be easily broken by the other side. It can be imagined that the power of the human lightning is so powerful that it's amazing. And this also makes Yi Tian feel a strong risk. His all-out strike fails to work, which shows that the power of this human lightning is far beyond the level of the 8th floor of the cave. If you don't pay attention, you will die. Clearer. It's almost there, but almost at the same time, Yi Tian also found that with the appearance of human lightning, the movement of Yuanqi and Guishu of Kunlun became clearer at this moment. Boom! But almost at the same time, the humanoid lightning suddenly attacked Yi Tian with one blow. Suddenly, it formed a huge shining power grid and covered Yi Tian. It seems that there is a violent and terrifying energy hidden in the arc. It makes people feel that as long as it is touched, it will be a dead end. Sword Yi Tianxian calms himself and moves his mind. He urges the fierce soldiers to fly their swords, and the blade is shining. At the same time, Yuan Tianian urges him to the extreme. He keeps wandering along the path of the flow of vitality when the human lightning is running, trying to find out the natural spirit jade. He knew that the only way to solve the present terrible crisis was to find the position of nature Lingyu and capture it. Otherwise, he would have to die in Kunlun and be destroyed by the thunder. Kung! Almost at this time, the fierce sword sweeping towards the power grid, after touching the power grid, flashed. It seemed that it could turn everything under the edge of the sword into a sharp sword. For the first time, it made a trembling sound and immediately fell back. What? Yi Tian's flying sword is not the opponent of this human lightning. Cloudfei completely dull, Zheng Zhang looking at this sharp fast flying sword, head buzz, almost can't believe what his eyes see. In her eyes, Yi Tian's flying sword is just like invincible, and not only he, I'm afraid the vast majority of mountain people have the same mind in their hearts. But now, this power grid is actually shooting Yi Tian's flying sword away. If she didn't see this scene with her own eyes, she couldn't believe it was actually happening. Can't fierce soldiers fly swords? When Yi Tian heard this, he was also shocked. This situation was completely unexpected. But immediately, he thought that the golden black fire semi-immortal army Dan stove flew out of Shumi ring, shining a little bit, and smashed it to the power grid. He wanted to shake the power grid and defeat it with the power of semi-immortal soldiers. Boom! Jinwu fire Bangxianbing Dan furnace fell, the open power grid immediately sagged down. Half-immortal soldier. Niafu can't help but be astonished when she sees the Jinwu fire elixir. Her eyes are full of shock. Although she saw Yi Tian take out the Jinwu fire elixir before, she found it extraordinary, but she never thought it was a half-immortal soldier elixir. Such a thing, put in the square-inch spirit domain, is absolutely rare treasure. Incredible! In this barren world, there are such powerful things as Bangxianbing. Is it true that there is a secret of immortality here? Niafu shocked inexplicably, looking at the golden black fire half-immortal soldier Dan stove. The color of disbelief in his eyes has been rich to the point of no more. Although she doesn't know how Yi Tian escaped the attack of the great monks in Yupu realm and appeared on the earth, there is no doubt that today's Yi Tian, after his accomplishments have been completely lost, will come back again, and all the secret treasures he once possessed no longer exist. Under such circumstances, Yi Tian could only have obtained this semi-immortal army Dan stove from the earth. There are such elites on a barren planet. Doesn't it mean that perhaps long ago, there was a brilliant cultivation civilization here, or even the secret of immortality pursued by the Dark Lord? Yi Tian, is he the son of this planet? Is it on him? Even this moment in Niafu's heart also gave birth to such a bold idea. In the past, when she was in the square-inch spiritual realm, she had heard a saying that in every bright world or a star of desperate recovery, there would always be a person who inherited an era or a star's fate. Such existence, no matter what chance on this star, can be obtained and used by him, making him grow faster than his contemporaries. But now, in Yi Tian's body, through this golden black fire half-immortal soldier Dan stove, she feels that she seems to see such existence. After all, if not, it's really hard to explain what happened to Yi Tian. Boom! But before Niafu's mind was calmed down, the power grid, which had been pressed out of a huge depression by the Jinwu fire bank Xianbing Danlu, was suddenly bursting with a strong rebound force. The arc after arc was wildly intertwined and swaying. Finally, it was the Jinwu fire bank Xianbing Danlu that flew into the air. Boom! The next breath, the huge Jinwu fire Dan furnace, then heavily hit the valley around Kunlun Guishu. Such a terrible bombardment should have shaken the ground, let a lot of rocks roar down to the ground, but the strange thing is, after the Jinwu fire Dan furnace hit the valley, it was all calm and no waves, let alone the rocks rolling, even without a trace of smoke splashing up, everything it's as calm as an ancient well. This is the power of the natural field. Even if it is bombarded so violently, it can't damage and disturb it, so as not to be destroyed by it. God, it's incredible. It's so powerful. Niafu trembles and stares at the scene in front of her eyes. She gasps for air. Although Yi Tian's current ability can't make the Jinwu fire Banxian soldier's Dan furnace display too powerful power, it can't be underestimated just by the power of Jinwu fire Banxian soldier's Dan furnace itself, but now, it's amazing that it's so easy to fly. Zheng. Almost at the same time when the Jinwu fire elixir furnace was shot away, the human lightning suddenly raised its hand. At the next moment, the power grid that spread to Yi Tian suddenly condensed and turned into a bright, shining and sharp sword, which stabbed Yi Tian. This sword, ethereal to the extreme, but also accurate to the extreme, points directly at Yi Tian's chest, sword meaning like a net, intertwined dance, firmly locked. Let Yi Tian feel at this moment, like being watched by a poisonous snake, that sense of crisis, let him along the tail vertebra to the back neck, are all covered with cold sweat. At this moment, the strong sense of crisis has been the strongest since he came to the earth. Moreover, he asked himself, even if he used any means, there was absolutely no way to avoid this terrible sword. In front of this sword, waiting for him, he must die. Yi Tian. Not only Yi Tian himself, but also Yunfei felt the despairing atmosphere at this moment. Her expression changed greatly. She could not help but quickly approached the valley. She wanted to do her best to help Yi Tian get rid of the danger she was facing at this moment. Shua! But almost at the same time, Niafu moved. With a flash of her body, she appeared beside Yunfei. She stretched out her hand and clasped it on her shoulder. Shengsheng stopped her pace. Then, she said in a deep voice, Miss Yun, the master said that you are not allowed to go near the Kunlun ruins. Before he leaves, Yi Tian sends a message to Niafu. If something abnormal happens to him, if Yunfei doesn't get close to Kunlun Guishu, then it's okay. But if Yunfei wants to get close, then she has to stop Yunfei at all costs. For Yi Tian's words, Niafu naturally is to strictly implement, absolutely dare not relax assent Yi Tian. Yunfei struggles hard, but she can't get rid of Niafu at all. She can only watch helplessly. The shining thunder sword in the hand of human lightning is a little closer to Yi Tian to take his life. Even at this moment, Yunfei's tears, like a broken line, trickled down her cheek, blurring the world in front of her eyes, and she couldn't see anything clearly. That kind of grief let her unbearable, pain to the extreme. Even she didn't realize, one day, she could even ignore life and death to save a man, and, for a man's life and death, and feel such heartache. Don't worry, master. He'll be fine. In him, there is something to keep alive. Niafu sees this, caught Cloud Fei, sink a voice to comfort away. Found it. There it is. Almost at the same time, Yi Tianyuan's eyes shine through the sky in the Kunlun ruins. He sees that with the action of human lightning holding the sword, the circuit of Yuanqi becomes more and more clear at this moment. Finally, all the circuits of Yuanqi turn to a little bit on the ground. All the power, all the energy, the source of birth, it is on this point. At the same time, the sharp sword pierced by the human lightning has reached Yi Tian's chest. The next breath will go deep into his body and take his life. But almost at the same time, along the pocket of Yi Tian's chest, suddenly there was a light splashing out, followed by a shadow that was almost the same as Yi Tian's, suddenly came out, grabbed ahead of Yi Tian, straightened up his chest, and met the fierce sword. What's this? This strange picture let Cloud Fei immediately stunned, the whole person dull and can't believe looking at the front of this screen, head buzzing. What she saw today was too much, totally beyond her understanding. Even if she was a mountain dweller and had been in contact with ancient practitioners, what she saw before her still made her feel like a dreamer. Death Talisman. This talisman can die for the master once. Next, it depends on the master himself whether he can come out alive or die. Niafu whispers, but her eyes just stare at Yi Tian. Although the talisman for death is extremely powerful, it can only die once. If Yi Tian can seize this opportunity, he can live. But if Yi Tian misses this opportunity, he will still be dead with the power of human lightning and the astonishment and terror of this sword. She would like to know whether Yi Tian could seize this short opportunity to turn against the wind and survive as a Jedi. If Yi Tian can succeed, then she thinks that her conjecture is right. Yi Tian is the lucky son of the star under her feet. And she herself, from now on, will never betray Yi Tian. She really regards him as her master, follows him and gives up her life. I have only one chance, you have only one. If you can't kill me this time, you'll never want to kill me. At the same time, Yi Tian murmured. Taking the chance to defend himself against the sword for the death talisman, his body moved and suddenly appeared in the position where the nature Lingyu was. In a moment, all the mana in his body was poured into his right hand, and he leaned out towards the ground with one hand. Boom! This palm infuses all Yi Tian's mana. The moment the palm falls to the ground, the fierce roar suddenly explodes. Immediately after that, the original soil layer has been blasted into a big pit, and countless earth and stone, like smoke and dust, fly away in all directions. The natural field, the rest of the location, because of the protection of the field, even the Jinwu fire bank Xianbingdan stove cannot be destroyed, but here is different. Here is the eye position, is the weakest position of the whole field, so Yi Tian's hand can play a role. In the moment when the earth and rock scattered, there were countless bright but warm lights along the bombardment holes. They splashed out along the holes. In a short time, they quickly spread out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, they covered the whole Kunlun ruins. That kind of feeling, people feel, just like at this moment, there is a bright sun rising in the ruins of Kunlun, to shine on the whole world. What's more, at this moment, the flowers and plants in the whole Kunlun ruins seem to have been moistened. In an instant, they are swaying and growing up. Even the most common grass, in such a short period of time, has grown to the height of knees. Moreover, many wildflowers are all open, one after another. Flowers have a bowl full of laughter, gorgeous, graceful to the extreme. Not only Kunlun Guishu, but also the snow around Kunlun Guishu is melting at this moment, exposing the soil below. Then, the weeds and wildflowers that would have grown only after the snow melt next summer sprout and grow at this moment. In the ice and snow, in an instant, an out-of-place oasis appeared. Such a picture is extremely beautiful, but also extremely strange. What is this god? How can there be such a strong vitality? Niafu has been dull, staring at this series of sudden visions, and then looking at those gorgeous vitality in the valley. His fingers are constantly shaking madly at the moment, and his spirit feels a strong and unparalleled shock of terror. Although she came from the square-inch spiritual realm and was used to seeing those mysterious things, the scene before her was still the only one she saw. She couldn't understand what was full of vitality that could lead to such a brilliant and unpredictable burst of vitality. Not only Niafu, Yunfei has lost her voice completely at this moment. She is staring at the front, and her mind is completely shocked by the strange splendor. She can't understand why there is such an incredible burst of vitality in the ice and snow. Nature's jade. Not to mention these people, Tian was also shocked, and completely confirmed that the things in front of him were natural Lingyu. There was no doubt that there was no other thing except this Lingyu that could bloom such pure and rich vitality, even the best Lingyu. Zheng. But almost at the same moment, along the void, suddenly there was the trembling sound of the sword blade. Yi Tianyu swept away, and immediately saw that the human lightning, at this moment, was the human figure interwoven with the death talisman, twisted into pieces. In a moment, he stabbed him with his sword. Sorry, this time, you don't have a chance. The lightning in human form roars, and Yi Tian's face is not afraid. He laughs and flies forward. Then he enters the hole bombarded by palm force and looks down. At this moment, there is a brown and white rock in the hole, and the light comes from its depth. Bang! Without a moment's hesitation, Yi Tian raised his hand and slapped it heavily on the brown-white rock. After smashing it, he saw that in the depth of the rock, there was a crystal-clear jade, the size of a fist, emitting pure light. The world often says that there can be no perfect thing in this world, even the most exquisite and peerless things have defects. But this is obviously inappropriate to use on this spirit jade. At least, for Yi Tian, he can't find a more suitable adjective except the word perfect. Such a perfect, thrilling, and even people can't bear to damage it. Shwa! However, at this moment, the human form lightning is behind, and life and death are hanging on the line. Yi Tian can't care so much. He suddenly raises his hand and holds the natural spirit jade tightly in his hand. Then, Sua Wangguan's idea runs and absorbs the vitality and aura into his body. Boom! In a flash, wisps of vitality and aura, just like the flood of breaking the dike, go to Yi Tian's body. For a moment, Yi Tian felt that his whole body was more comfortable than ever. There was a mysterious energy, like warm water. With the operation of Sua Wangguan's idea, he kept swimming around his body. It was warm and comfortable to the extreme, which made people have a kind of indulgence, and some of them couldn't extricate themselves. In particular, the feeling of lightness and dexterity made him feel that he was about to emerge as an immortal at this moment. More than that, he could feel that at this moment, all the flesh, bones and viscera in his whole body were nourished by that kind of vitality and aura, and even every cell was undergoing a huge transformation at this moment. Especially when he thought of Sua Wangguan, he felt that this change was more obvious. His whole body was constantly shaking, every cell was shaking, and a trace of impurities were constantly discharged along the pores, and his constitution was constantly strengthening and extremely rapid. Especially later, it made him feel that the joints of bones were shaking violently, like the impact of gold and jade, the roar of viscera, like the baptism of subtle thunder. Visible to the naked eye, Yi Tian's body surface quickly appeared a layer of sticky material, that is his flesh, bone, viscera and cell resonance, entered a mysterious state as if the essence was in evolution. Under that layer of sticky material, Yi Tian's flesh and bones seemed to be transformed into divine gold and jade. There is an extremely powerful energy, which is as clear and perfect as nature's spirit jade. As if, this day's spirit jade, is to transform his body into a perfect body. Dong dong dong. In an instant, along Yi Tian's body, there was a fierce roar like the beating of a drum. Every shock, every fluctuation and roar made the bright and clear blood sweep into the four limbs. God, this is Nature Lingyu Master, is he going to be reborn and become an immortal? At this moment, Niafu finally realized why Yi Tian had such an incredible transformation. However, this discovery also made her eyes shine brilliantly, and made her more convinced that the infertile planet she was stepping on was really the starting point of the future world and the mysterious land of immortality. Similarly, Yi Tian was also the son of Qi Yun in this land of immortality. Dong dong dong, the heartbeat is constantly echoing, more terrifying and more powerful than before. Even when the heart is working, the sound of blood flowing seems to move like the tide in the turbulent waves at this moment. Along his body, there is a kind of explosive power. The breath of rising constitution is clear and perceptible, and even makes people feel that his body, at this moment, seems to be turned into a huge furnace, condensing terrible energy. This scene is shocking enough. However, Tian feels that his body is better than ever at this moment. His body is undergoing earth-shaking, which can be called a radical change. Even from the opening and closing of his eyes, there are rays of light flying away, interwoven with strands of Taoist patterns, which seems to be able to explore the secrets of heaven and earth. Boom! I don't know how long it took, Tian's body suddenly trembled violently, as if through something, as if there was a layer of shackles in front of him, which was smashed by his fist. From then on, the sea and the sky. In a twinkling, Tian felt that the world in front of him had become clearer at this moment. He seemed to see the essence of all things, and his hearing had been greatly improved. When his mind sank down, he could hear the sound of melting ice and snow in a very distant place. His mind also became more powerful at this moment. When it dispersed, it covered the world. The whole Kunlun ruins, all under his control, cannot escape his perception. Not only that, at this moment, along his body, there are more than a few light bursts, like a brilliant sun, releasing billions of brilliance to the outside world. That terrible appearance, as if as a god-devil, walked out from the myth, appeared in front of the world. Tian's body is peaceful, and all his pores are open. Under the operation of Sua Wangwen's idea, he crazily devours the strong vitality of Lingyu. He has a feeling that he used to live in the deep mire, and at this moment, he finally broke away from it, and the whole person was empty, and he got the extreme and an instant freedom of life. Is this the feeling that magic power is transformed into immortal power under the action of nature's spirit jade? Or is this the power of a near-perfect celestial body? Tian clenched his fist tightly and felt that there was a burning stove in his body, which constantly provided him with strength and hammered his body, making his flesh clearer and closer to the nearly perfect immortal body. He has a feeling that as long as he is willing, he can easily make a crack in the void with a fist. Those ally gates that used to be broken by fierce soldiers and flying swords can now be easily penetrated with a fist. Although his inner strength is very gentle and clear, if he wants to, he can be as strong and powerful as fire. If he meets Lu Bufan again now, it's very simple. With one easy punch, he can annihilate Lu Bufan, let him eliminate the world, and never give him the slightest chance to escape from his own hands. It's a pity that this natural Ling Jade is still a little too small. Although it makes me feel like I'm getting out of the mire, I feel like I'm reborn and as powerful as I can be, there's still a part of the body that hasn't been improved. It needs more natural Ling Jade to get complete transformation. Tianzai felt it carefully, and found that although most parts of the body had become light and smart at this moment, there was still a heavy feeling that was not consistent with that kind of light and smart at this moment. There was no doubt that this was the area that had not been perfectly baptized and forged by nature's spirit jade. But he also knew that he was greedy. He was very precious in nature. Even when he was in Fangsu and Lingyu, he had never owned it as a great monk in Yupu realm, not to mention that now he was just a man in the 8th floor of a small cave. No, now he is no longer the 8th floor of the cave, but the 9th floor of the cave. The powerful power of nature Lingyu has made him easily break through the shackles of the 8th floor of the cave without the help of any pills. He has successfully arrived at the 9th floor of the cave. Moreover, the 9th floor of the cave is directly complete. Now, what he is facing is the gap from the 9th floor of the cave to the 8th floor of the cave. Although this is only the second realm of monk's cultivation, there is no doubt that it is absolutely on the earth. Since the end of the inheritance of ancient monks, the first sea-watching realm was born. The sea-watching realm handed by those who came can't count, because when they came, they already had accomplishments. Tian, however, is the only one who has set foot on the road of cultivation on earth and made a breakthrough all the way forward. Even, Tian felt that with the change of his body, he had a premonition that his future cultivation would be easier than before. As for the reason, it was very simple, because under the action of the natural spirit jade, his body was like a clear jade, without any impurities. As long as his cultivation reached, he only needed the catalysis of a little elixir, even if it was quality is not so good, can also do everything as it comes naturally, will not be half of the shackles. There is no doubt that such a change is the greatest effect of nature Lingyu, which can make the friars forge ahead on the road of cultivation without so many worries. Zheng. And at this moment, the clang sound suddenly rings behind Yi Tian, and the human lightning, at this moment, has arrived near. However, with the natural Lingyu absorbed by Yi Tian, this natural field has lost the source of kinetic energy at the moment. The light of the human form lightning has become dim, and the human form is no longer solid. Instead, it is wisps of light. What do you think you can do to me now? Fawn dream. Disappear from the world, Yi Tian sneered. Immediately, he raised his hand and held the tip of the lightning sword between his two fingers. Immediately, a magic force, like a magnificent tide, gushed forward. In an instant, the human body of lightning disintegrated, turned into endless light and rain, and disappeared between heaven and earth. Boom hoo! Almost at the same moment when the human lightning disappeared, the Kunlun Guishu, which was originally isolated from the outside world, suddenly had a low roar, and the mountains were shaking, followed by a terrible wind, whistling from the entrance of Kunlun Guishu. The strong wind, cold, wind and snow mixed, swept the moment, then spread out, in a flash, those originally green, high-spirited flowers and plants, instantly swept by the cold current, all stiff, along the branches and petals, formed a thin layer of ice armor. High-spirited life suddenly stopped. At this moment, the return of Kunlun ruins, and the outside world of wind and snow, has become one, no longer any difference. However, the vast expanses of frozen flowers and plants, as well as the originally high-spirited stream, which was condensed in the air, make this Kunlun ruins, which was originally intertwined with life and death, terrified and colorless, become a fairy tale world without dust. Meow meow. Snow Leopard's perceptive ability is the most sensitive. In a flash, she noticed the change of Kunlun ruins. She put out her paw and tried it in the valley. She found that there was no danger as she thought. Immediately, her big green eyes were full of eager to try. She jumped into Kunlun ruins, followed by her body. He even bit off a fresh flower covered with thin ice armor. After chewing it a few times, he found it tasteless and vomited it out of his mouth. The cat chews peony. It's a terrible thing. Yi Tian looks at the snow leopard and shakes his head with a bitter smile. Yi Tian, you're okay. That's great. At this time, seeing that the snow leopard rushes into the Kunlun ruins, and is safe and sound, Yunfei wakes up from the tremor, follows closely, with a look of ecstasy on her face, strides towards the position where Yi Tian is, and then rushes into his arms. At the same time, tears flow from the corner of her eyes. Before that moment, she really thought that after that, there would be no more leaves in the world. But now, it turns out, her previous worries are just superfluous. It's okay, you see I'm not okay now. The leaf day hears a sound, for a time some feel at a loss, but follow closely, then lightly patted to clap Cloud Fei's shoulder. The temperature some comforts away. But at the moment when her hand fell on Yunfei's shoulder, Yunfei's expression suddenly changed. It was like an electric shock. She quickly jumped out of Yetian's arms. Her cheek was so shy that she was almost bleeding. She was so shy that she was extremely shy. In any case, she never thought that one day, she would take the initiative to throw herself into a man's arms and weep for his life and death. But all of this only shows one thing, that is, she really likes this man. It seems that this unbearable debt of beauty is now one more. It's not only Yunfei, but Yi Tian's heart is full of insight and sighs. He also didn't expect, Cloud Fei just when he was in danger, unexpectedly will ignore the life and death of want to save him. A girl, regardless of her life, goes to save a man. How much she cares about the man in her heart can be imagined. Just, a rather snow, already let Leaf Day heart is full of guilt. Now, more a Cloud Fei, let him feel more at a loss, don't know what to do. There is no doubt that these girls are very good, and there is nothing to say about their kindness, but it is this kindness that makes him feel more and more sorry. Master, have you found that this world seems to be different from just now? And at this time, Niafu suddenly broke the silence, toward Yi Tian, carefully asked. Heaven and earth have changed? When Yi Tian heard this, he immediately threw away his thoughts, closed his eyes and felt it carefully. In a flash, he immediately found that the aura contained in the heaven and earth around him had become rich at this moment. Although he was still poor, he was much better than before. That kind of feeling, is like this world vitality withered planet, at this moment, is like seed germination, is experiencing a kind of recovery. Yunfei, can you feel it and see if you can find this unusual thing? Next, Yi Tian opens his mouth to Yunfei, and asks her to try to feel the change. Is it only the friars such as herself and Niefu who can see the change, or the mountain people such as Li and Yunfei can also get the chance and fortune? No. It's really different. In the past, I needed to run for a week to feel the vitality between heaven and earth. But now, when I run the cultivation method, I can feel it, and the efficiency is higher than before. Hearing this, Yunfei quickly sits down on his knees and tries the cultivation method of Shuiyuzong. He immediately finds that everything has changed as Yi Tian said. It is no longer the same as before. This change shocked her and made her feel even more happy. You know, the main reason why it was difficult to practice in the past was that the absorption efficiency of the vitality of heaven and earth was extremely low. But now, everything is different. If you use the cultivation method, you can feel the vitality of heaven and earth, and the absorption efficiency has also been improved. How can you not let people be ecstatic? I found that my constitution seems to be changing now, and my flesh and blood seem to be improving unconsciously. Closely following, Cloud Fei is to discover a more inconceivable circumstance, to Leaf Day excited way. Yunfei's physique is also changing? Yi Tian hears the sound and perceives it carefully. He immediately finds that his body is changing like Yunfei. However, the progress of the transformation is too subtle for him. He can't detect it at all. That's why he ignores it. This scene makes Yi Tian feel inconceivable. This kind of change in heaven, earth and human body makes him feel as if after he has cracked the Kunlun ruins, the heaven and earth has been revived and is changing towards the brilliant era of cultivation and civilization in the past. After all, Reiki becomes stronger and physique improves, all of which are making the human body more suitable for cultivation. However, he can't be sure at the moment. Only when he returns to Yudu and checks carefully to see if there are other people besides him and Yunfei can he be sure of this. Why didn't I feel the change in my body? Niefu hears their words and carefully perceives herself. However, she is shocked to find that she does not feel the slightest change in her body. Everything is the same as usual. Can't you feel the metamorphosis of the body? The Leaf Day hears a sound, not from some surprise toward Niefu to see one inconceivable way. I can't feel that everything in my body is as usual, without any change. Niefu shook his head, immediately let go of his mind, and said to Yi Tian, if you don't believe me, you can come to explore, and naturally you will find out. When Yi Tian hears the sound, he immediately turns his eyes to Niefu. As far as his eyes can reach, he immediately finds that Niefu's body is as quiet as a pool of stagnant water. He can't see any change. But Yunfei's body is different. He can clearly see that her body is changing all the time, the impurities in her blood are excreting, and the flesh and blood become more and more beautiful strong, the channels are more tenacious, and the perception of heaven and earth aura is also constantly enhanced. Although this kind of change is not huge but weak, even so, it will be strong enough when qualitative change is achieved by quantitative change. Why is there such a huge change? Yi Tian frowned and thought about it carefully. A little later, his eyes brightened, and he suddenly understood the reason why this strange scene happened. The answer is very simple, because Niefu was the Comer, the fusion between the friars of Fengsuan spiritual realm and the ordinary people of the earth. He can't avoid the breath of Fengsuan spiritual realm, instead of the pure earth like he and Yunfei people, that's why. It could be your origin, which led to all this. Thinking of this, Yi Tian looks at Yunfei and explains with a smile. Where did it come from? Niefu was stunned. Even though she understood the meaning of Yi Tian's words, she looked at Yi Tian in amazement and frowned. But master, you and I are not from the same place? Why can you, master? I'm different. No, this is my hometown. I've always been here. Hearing this, Yi Tian smiles and shakes his head to Niefu, vaguely telling the truth. When he came back to life from Fengsuan spiritual realm, what he carried was only the memory of Fengsuan spiritual realm, not the soul and body. Therefore, from beginning to end, he was a man of the earth, not a friar of Fengsuan spiritual realm. What? Yi Tian is a man on earth? Niefu hears this sound, immediately full face is stunned, can't believe of looking at Yi Tian, in the mind buzz long make ring. She had always thought that Yi Tian appeared on the earth after that fight because of chance. But now she found out that she had made a mistake. Yi Tian was never a monk in the square-inch spiritual realm, but a monk born in this immortal land. I'm afraid it's not just her. Once the news reaches the ears of the Lord of Darkness or the friars of Fengsuan's spiritual realm, it's bound to cause an uproar, which is enough to shock everyone. Even at this moment, she could not help suspecting that the reason why Yi Tian was in Fengsuan Lingyu at the beginning was that he was able to break through Yupu realm and achieve the prestige of Emperor Dan in just 200 years. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that he was a monk from the immortal land of the earth. Similarly, once the news comes out, it will certainly attract more eyes to this mysterious land of immortality, to come here and look for opportunities. Yi Tian, what do you mean by these words, Niafu? Is she an alien? And what does she mean by that? Have you ever been to an alien at this time? After hearing the dialogue between Yi Tian and Niafu, Yunfei is full of confusion and can't help asking Yi Tianfa. The vastness of the starry sky is unpredictable. Now you can't understand all this. Only when you become stronger in the future can you understand how big the world is, and we are just a drop in the vast sea. Yi Tian hears Yunfei's words and immediately explains to her with a smile, but it doesn't make it clear. After all, Yunfei's current cultivation strength is too weak. Knowing these secrets may not be a good thing for her. However, the words of the moment, Yi Tian's heart cannot help but gently sigh. The earth and the vast starry sky is indeed a drop in the ocean, but now, this drop in the sea, in the case of the so-called fairy secret, I'm afraid it has become the focus of countless eyes. If the friars on the earth were extremely strong, it would be fine. But now they are weak. If such a scene comes, I'm afraid they will only have the share of mermaid. Yi Tian didn't deny that he had been to the starry sky. Even, maybe living in the starry sky. Yunfei listened to Yi Tian's words, can't help but a burst of dejected, the heart is more shocked inexplicable, but at this moment, she also finally understand, why Yi Tian so young, will have such incredible strength. The reason is very simple, he is different from others, had been against the sky chance, boarded the starry sky. It's over. Let's go back to Yudu and have a look at the situation over there. What's going on now? At this time, Yi Tian digs off the topic and says with a smile to Yunfei. Cloud Fei hears a sound, this just returned to mind, after looking toward the snow mountains around, some reluctant to give up nodded. She knows that after leaving the snow mountain, her time alone with Yi Tian will be completely over. How to go in the future will be a mess. But there is no doubt that her heart, which used to be like an ancient well, will be shrouded in countless ripples from now on. In her heart, there will always be a face engraved and indelible. Soon, a group of 3 left Kunlun to return to the market and rush to Yudu. Meow meow. Along the way, Snow Leopard Dabai, Xiaobai and his family have been closely following Yi Tian and others. When they come to the pass of the mountain, they stop. Snow Leopard Xiaobai looks at the city at the foot of the mountain, then runs to Yi Tian, lowers his head, rubs against him, and cries twice. The city at the foot of the mountain is too cramped for you to live in. The snow mountain is the place where you can run freely. I will come to see you when I have time. You should remember what I said and practice well, but don't kill the innocent and bully the weak. In addition, if you feel lonely, you can go to the north foot of Kunlun Mountain to find a guy named Kunlun Mountain God. Like you, he is a spirit beast that opens up wisdom. I can come to meet you when my temple is built in the future. Yi Tian looks at the reluctant appearance of Snow Leopard Xiaobai, reaches out his hand and rubs his head, and says with a smile. In fact, he also liked this clever, cute, and dignified guy. Even for a moment, he wanted to take him with him, but soon he gave up the idea. The reason is very simple. The city should not be the place where these beasts live, especially in the hot and humid South China Sea. After going to that place, the snow leopard may follow him, but he will miss the snow mountain. And in the city, there is no snow leopard how to run and jump, free and uninhibited life. Unless the Miluo Palace is built, only such a spiritual land can make them live happily in it. But now, the Miluo Palace is only in the initial stage, and even the mountain protection spiritual array has not been built. It is really not suitable for snow leopards to live in the past. Meow meow. Snow leopard Xiaobai listens to Yi Tian's words and nods his head to show that after he has written it down, his brain bag arches Gong Yi Tian's legs, follows closely, crawls to the ground and makes a gesture of submission. This is a courtesy of snow leopard when facing the king of their group. Snow leopard big white and snow leopard small white, see the appearance of small white, without any hesitation, also with kneeling in the snow, Tian said surrender. Let's go and live a good life. There will be time to meet each other in the future. Tian was moved and patted the head of the snow leopard family. Then he continued to walk towards Yudu. But, they go far away, can also see, snow leopard of those big and small figure, at this moment still standing in the snow, watching them leave. Unexpectedly, these snow leopards are so affectionate and righteous. Yunfei sighs gently. This kind of picture is really moving and sighing. Most of the time, animals are more affectionate and righteous than human beings. Tian chuckles and takes out 2 pills from the Jinwu fire pill stove. He hands them to Yunfei and says, "These are 2 pills for Qingxin. Take them back to Shaoqing. A pill for Qingxin should be enough for her. You can keep the rest. In case your sisters encounter similar situations again, you can take it to them." Yunfei silently nodded, but in the heart is a wry smile. She knows, take this pill, I'm afraid it's not others, but yourself. Her heart is in a mess now. If she can't come out, it must be similar to Shaoqing. Well, thank you. Yunfei nodded to Yetian and said thank you. Immediately, he looked a little dejected and said, I'm going to go too. Won't you go to Yundu? Tian hears the sound and looks at Yunfei. He asks in surprise. I'm not going. Younger martial sister Shaoqing is still waiting for me. Yunfei shook his head and said slowly. However, the reason why she is like this is not entirely because of Shaoqing, but also partly because she is worried that if she continues to be with Tian, she will make that feeling even more unable to support herself. Well, we will meet again in the future. Tian also understands that the reason why Yunfei wants to leave is that in addition to Shaoqing, he is afraid that there are his own factors in it. After bowing to Yunfei, he says with a smile. The mountains and rivers meet. We'll meet again in the future. Yunfei nodded with a smile, arched his fist to Tian, then turned to the distance. Finally, the figure disappeared in the snow. Tian quietly looks at the figure of Yunfei leaving. He is disappointed. He knows that the share of beauty he is shouldering is now heavier. Master, I can feel that Miss Yunfei likes you. Why don't you say it? Niefu looks at this scene in front of her, and she can't help but ask Yi Tianxuan a little perplexed. You don't understand. Tian shook his head with a bitter smile and said slowly. The matter between him and Yunfei is not only emotional, but also related to Ning Yao and Shaoqing. Although the relationship between Yunfei and Shaoqing is a teacher-sister, there is no difference between them. Shaoqing is even possessed by the devil because of him. He can't wake up. If something happens between him and Yunfei, then how can Yunfei face Shaoqing? I can't understand. We friars dare to love and hate. We're not ordinary people. We have a long life and good physical ability. How many people do we like? As long as we are sincere, we don't have to worry about so much. If I have such high accomplishments as your master, if several boys like me, I don't mind. Niefu is very fierce and bold. Seeing that Tian seems to be different from those friars he met in the past, he has the courage to say. Dare to love, dare to hate. Like together Tian listens to Niefu's words, although some are dumbfounded for the latter part of her words, but think about it carefully, this is not unreasonable. After all, the cultivation of friars is a matter against heaven, fighting with heaven and earth, which these ordinary people can't understand. Under such circumstances, it is nothing to do something shocking occasionally. But all this, after all, is to wait until Ning Yao wake up later. But soon, Tian shook his head, made up his mind, and left these confused thoughts behind. A moment later, he and Niefu came to Yudu. The change of heaven and earth has spread to Yudu. People in the city are also undergoing transformation. As soon as he arrived in Yudu, Tian immediately realized that the vitality of heaven and earth in Yudu was no different from that in Kunlun Mountain, and it became a bit stronger. Especially for the people living in the city, their bodies were slowly changing. This scene shakes Tian's mind. He knows that a big era is about to sweep this silent planet for a long time. Perhaps, the embers of cultivation civilization will continue to shine. In the same way, with the change of heaven and earth, there will be many arrogant people coming out of the world. Even more, he could not help hoping that if he could break all the 4 Jedi, what would happen to this star? Heaven and earth, different from before. Yi Tian thought to himself that from now on, the world will become different. More strange things will happen on this land. Many creatures and things that seem to exist in mythology will appear in the lives of ordinary people. Yi Tian. And when Yi Tian sighs, along not far away, comes Ning Shui's cheers, followed by a figure in a white down jacket, like an elf in the snow, running to him lightly, and then rushed into his arms and hugged him tightly. During this time, she was always worried. Although Yi Tian didn't tell her that he was going to Kunlun Guishu, she had a premonition that the place Yi Tian went to must be a dangerous place. Otherwise, she would not be allowed to go with her. Now, seeing Yi Tian safe and sound return, she was really relieved. Don't worry, I'm back, aren't I? Seeing this, Yi Tian pats Ning Shui on the shoulder and comforts her. He asks Ning Shui curiously, "What body method have you got recently? And has there been a breakthrough in cultivation?" He felt that when Ning Shui just came over, his steps were very light, just like a gust of wind. Moreover, even the footprints left by stepping on the snow were very shallow. All these were the signs of great improvement in body method. However, he didn't teach Ning Shui any body method. This scene made him curious. Body method? I didn't practice any body method, but today I feel inexplicably that my body has become very light, and my feet are like stepping on the wind. Rather Snow hears a sound, just some bashful loosen to embrace the arm of Leaf Day, then shook to shake head, slowly way. Step on the wind? Yi Tian was surprised, and then said to Ning Shui, "Run in the snow again, let me have a look." Ning Shui hears the sound, without thinking, immediately turns around and runs around in the snow. Wearing a heavy down jacket, she is as light as a snow rabbit in the snow mountain. Every step is incomparably light. The speed makes Yi Tian feel a little surprised. Not only that, but Yi Tian also found that when Ning Shui's steps fell on the snow, along her feet, it seemed as if there was a natural wind cyclone. It was extremely light to lift her body, so that her body was very light and her feet could be very fast. Not only that, Yi Tian also found that these wind-whirling children are very mysterious. They seem to be integrated with Ning Shui's body. They can move with her mind. It makes people feel that this is not a secret practice, but an instinct of the body. Are you sure you haven't practiced any body method? This scene, let Yi Tian can't help but be curious, to Ning Shui curious questions, want to know an answer. You didn't teach me, where can I find the body method to practice, and I haven't practiced recently. Although Ning Shui doesn't understand why Yi Tian keeps asking, she still says frankly that when she speaks, her face is more shy. These days, because she was worried about Yi Tian, she didn't think about tea or rice, and she didn't even have an appetite. She didn't have any idea of cultivation until today. There is no body method and no breakthrough in the realm, but it can produce a cyclone under one's feet, and it is as fast as the wind. Is it because the Kunlun Guishu, the Jedi, has been unsealed, which has opened the spiritual root of Ning Shui after the changes of heaven and earth? Hearing this, Yi Tian felt a little move in his heart and suddenly came up with a very bold guess. Lingzhen is the root of all practitioners, which is consistent with their bodies. In this way, practitioners can enter the country at an amazing speed and become powerful in the shortest time. For example, Ning Shui, if she really unlocks the wind spirit root in her body, it means that when she practices in the future, if she practices the secret method of wind attribute, or the secret method of running the wind attribute, the entry speed, and the blooming power, she can surpass ordinary people a lot. However, even in the square-inch spiritual realm, the monks who have spiritual roots are rare. Although the earth has changed, it's incredible that some people have spiritual roots so soon. Is this the reason why the Dark Lord thinks that there is a mystery here? But the more you think about it, the more convinced Yi Tian is that Ning Shui really gave birth to Lingzhen, because there is no other explanation for this situation in her body. Then, can the constant transformation and sublimation that my body feels be regarded as the root of living beings? Immediately after that, Yi Tian suddenly thought of the kind of change that happened to him. Strictly speaking, this kind of transformation is really a manifestation of Lingzhen. The vitality circulates back and forth, making the body stronger and the road of cultivation more forward. If we say that Ning Shui's spiritual root, which changes with heaven and earth, is more inclined to art, then his spiritual root is more in line with the essence. I'll teach you some techniques. You can have a try. With this in mind, Tian teaches Ning Shui the secret of Fenglin and asks her to try it to see when she can learn it and whether the released power can be as fast and powerful as a monk with Fenglingen. Good. Ning Shui is jubilant. Without thinking, she practices according to Tian's instruction. Hiss. After a short video, Ning Shui successfully mastered the secret of Fenglin. When she waved her hand, a wind blade flew out and swept forward to release its power. Although the strength of the wind blade was far less than that of Tian, it was much stronger than that of a beginner. It's really Fenglingen. Seeing this, Tian immediately determined his previous judgment. Search the internet to see if there are many strange things happening around the world today. Immediately after that, Tian took out his mobile phone and began to search for the anecdotes. Heaven and earth are really different. At first glance, Tian immediately saw a lot of strange news in the past. For example, in a hospital, a child who had suffered from cancer suddenly had a fire all over her body, which burned the bed and caused a fire. But she didn't do anything. Not only that, but also the cancer was miraculously cured. Under the news, there were so many comments. Some people were laughing and scolding, saying that now the news is really more and more dare to make up. Even this kind of completely ignoring science can be written out. However, some people said that he was a person from the hospital and saw this scene with his own eyes. In addition, some people say that this incredible thing happened around them. There was a doll who suddenly seemed to be electrified. As long as someone touched him, he would feel shocked. Some people said that there was a dog in the countryside. In the morning, he suddenly stopped eating leftovers and jumped onto the table. After eating the master's food, the master wanted to scold him. But there was a golden light in his eyes, which scared the master. Before he could react, the dog ran away. A lot of such strange news, countless. The change of heaven and earth has been on the right track, irreversible, everything will become different from the past. Tian was shocked when he looked at the news. Moreover, he was more aware that the pattern of people living in the mountains would be reversed. Those people would never miss these seedlings with spiritual roots. Moreover, many hidden details in the past might also manifest themselves in the world. Not only that, I am afraid that the difficulty of arrival will be reduced because of the presence of these people with spiritual roots, and the number of arrivals will be greatly increased. However, these things, after all, are only heard on the internet, not witnessed by his own eyes. For the time being, he is not sure whether these people are hearsay and deliberately exaggerated. Have you already dealt with the jade mine? Thinking of this, Tian asks Ning Shui. He wanted to go back to the South China Sea to see if there was such a thing happening among those he knew, so as to confirm whether the change of heaven and earth and the change of spiritual roots had really happened around the world. To Mr. Yi, all the jade mines have been disposed of. I have delivered them to Miss Ning, and the jade I promised you before has also been delivered to Miss Huning. Each piece is the best kind of tallow and yudu, including white jade, black jade, topaz and other kinds of colored jade. Hearing this, the Jade Emperor hurried forward and saluted Tian respectfully. Good. Hearing this, Tian nodded slightly, and then said to Ning Shui, it's over. Let's go back to the South China Sea. Well. Ning Shui, although some do not give up, but also understand that the arrival, sooner or later will come, can only nod. Emperor Yu's efficiency is very high. Soon, he bought a ticket for Tian to return to the South China Sea. The reason why it's not a ticket is that Ning Shui especially emphasized that he wanted to take this kind of soft sleeper train and have a look at the scenery of the north and south of the river. Tian knows that the reason why Ning Shui does this is because he wants to spend more time alone with him, so he doesn't refuse anything. Before leaving, Tian went to Lu's old house again, and put all the devil jade that was sealed and forbidden to repair in Kunlun into the storage ring. These Kunlun shows are the flames and seeds left by Kunlun. He hopes that one day, when he is strong enough, he can help them to solve the current situation, restore them to their original state, and see the land gradually recovering. After everything is done, Tian and Ning Shui board the train to Nanhai. This time, because Yudu was the departure station, and the Jade Emperor came forward, the soft bedroom he bought, although there were 4 berths, was actually only 2 of them. Along the way, they would not be disturbed by anyone. As for Nyefu, she was in another box, even more comfortable than the 2 of them. She was alone in a box. On the train, Tian occasionally goes out of the box and breathes twice. When he gets out of the car, he finds that the most common thing these people talk about on the train is the change of heaven and earth. Many people have met or heard about some strange existence around them, and have all kinds of incredible abilities. Some people run faster suddenly, just like a gust of wind. Some people can have a fire when they rub their palms, others can spend record-breaking time in the water. All of the things, bizarre, for ordinary people, it is just like what happened in the legend. Of course, all this is not only about the talks, but also caused some turbulence. Some people said that there was a house where they had a sudden fire for no reason, but they could not find the source of the fire and the person who set it on fire. The police suspected that it was another family who had feud with the family, but they could not find any evidence. It's a good thing for the world to become stronger as the world changes, but it will also usher in many shocks. I'm afraid there will be more and more such things. When Tian listened to these conversations, he sighed softly in his heart. People eat grains and grains naturally. Not everyone is pure-hearted. Especially when he has powerful power that he didn't have, he can easily do some ridiculous things. How can I feel that this world is going to be different from the world I have experienced before? Not only is Yi Tian, but Ning Shui, who was originally immersed in being able to get along with Yi Tian alone for a while, is also aware of these differences and has many feelings. In such a world, we must make ourselves stronger to protect ourselves and the people and things we care about. The leaf day hears a speech, lightly smile a, to rather snow solemnly its matter of exhort away. As he said, this is an era of sudden change. In such an era, the only way out is to become stronger. If you dare to relax and wait, you will be trampled on by the powerful and ride on your head. You can't even breathe. You can only be slaughtered like fish on the chopping board. Ning Shui nods, looks at Yi Tian, and then clenches her fist. She has already thought about it and wants to be stronger. In this way, no matter what happens in the future, she can stand side by side with Yi Tian and share more things for him. Along the way, time passed quickly, but when passing Jiangcheng, the train suddenly stopped, and stayed for a full hour, but still did not leave, far beyond the specified time, and did not let all the passengers get off. What happened? What's the delay? We are in a hurry to go home. After a long stay, many passengers were worried and went out of the car one after another, constantly questioning. Soon, the steward came over and explained to all the people, saying that there were some temporary faults on the train, and they were removing the obstacles. They asked everyone to wait for a while, and soon they would be on the road again, and they would speed up urgently, trying to make up for the delay. Although the passengers were puzzled, they got an explanation and finally had to sit down. However, a little later, something more unexpected happened. After the door of the carriage was opened, all the lights of the carriage were turned on. Then a group of policemen in police uniform came in. Under the guidance of the steward, they began to check the passengers' ID cards and tickets one by one, and carefully checked the places where the luggage was placed, even the area under the seats. Not only that, Yi Tian also found that these police officers were obviously wearing guys around their waists. In addition to them, there were some soldiers with guns and live ammunition following them. They looked around with sharp eyes and cold eyes. At first glance, they were veterans who had been killed in the battlefield. What's going on in the car? Although the stewardess gave an explanation to check the identity of everyone temporarily, the battle still made Yi Tian smell something unusual. Not only he, but also the passengers became flustered. Officer, what happened? At this time, Yi Tian suddenly saw an acquaintance. It was the police officer who had taken Li Hualian to prison before, so he got close to him and asked him. It turned out that it was Mr. Yi. There was a case in Zhengcheng. The vault of a bank was emptied. There was no sign of damage outside the vault. There was no sign of being drilled into the ground, but the cash and gold bars were gone. When the police officer saw someone holding him, he wanted to break away, but when he saw Yi Tian who had taken Li Hua's face, he immediately showed a smile on his face. Immediately, he glanced around, confirmed that no one was looking, and said in a low voice, "When we got the alarm that someone was sneaking into the vault, we rushed over it the first time, and then found a guy suddenly jumped out of the bank, and guilty conscience, CS, began to run, but also run fast. We cannot catch up with the car. Finally saw the man into the railway station we checked, did not see anyone, the only stop is this train, suspect people in the car. But I'm really curious. How did that guy run so fast, and where did he hide so much cash and gold bars? The vault was stolen." When Tian heard the police officer's words, he nodded slightly to show that he knew it. At the same time, in his eyes, there was more color passing by. According to this police statement, he felt that the cause of the theft of the vault was probably a guy who had become a resident of Tullingen and Fenglingen. Relying on Tullingen's ability, he sneaked into the vault, removed all the cash and gold bars, and then buried them in the soil near the vault. He planned to escape from the vault and then turned back to take them out. As for the reason why he runs faster than the car, it should be that he, like Ning Shui, has become a Fenglingen, so he can run so fast. Mr. Yi, I know you are a man of great ability. If something goes wrong with you in the car, please contact us as soon as possible. At this moment, the police officer looked at Tian. After a solemn sentence, he shook his head with a wry smile and said, "Now there are more and more strange cases. I sometimes feel that we can't really control anything by relying on us. Well, if I find anything, I'll let you know as soon as possible." Tian listened to the officer's emotion, nodded with a smile, and assured him. But he knew that although these police officers were armed with live ammunition, when they met the guy who had Tullingen, as long as the other side hid in the soil, as long as they avoided the investigation, it was very difficult to catch him, which could be said to be like landing in the sky. Sure enough, a moment later, these police officers and the soldiers checked from beginning to end, but in the end, they still couldn't find the whereabouts of the burglar, and then they had to leave the train and return to the platform. Immediately, with a dull whistle, the train went back on the road. "The man who stole the vault is the same as us, isn't he?" After waiting for the police officer to leave, Ning Shui asks Tian. "Well, it's supposed to be a guy with touring roots, but this guy is very unusual. He not only has touring roots and Fengling roots, but also just got this kind of mutation and evolution, he even mastered the technique of Tuduan. This time, we should be careful. I doubt that guy didn't leave the train." Tian nods and tells Ning Shueshan. "Good." Rather snow-smell speech, ordered to nod, agreed to come down. Bang bang. With their conversation, the train continued to move forward. A moment later, it left Jiangcheng and continued to go all the way south. Dong. I don't know how long it has passed. Just when Tian absorbed the aura of heaven and earth, he suddenly felt that there was a slight sound of footsteps outside the carriage. It's not surprising that the train has a long journey and there are footsteps outside the room. After all, it's inevitable that someone will get up to go to the toilet, but only the sound of footsteps, but not the sound of opening the door, which is unreasonable. You know, the soft sleeper compartment is closed. People in other compartments can't come here at all. This makes Tian have some doubts in his heart at the moment. At the moment, the owner of the footsteps outside will be the thief who emptied the vault. And at this time, let Tian some sad scene appeared, the footsteps unexpectedly stopped at the door of his car and Ningxue. Wow! Then, the door of the soft sleeper carriage was opened from the outside, and a dark shadow came in from the outside. Immediately, the door was gently closed. This series of actions, creeping, almost made people not hear a single sound. Pa-ta! But almost at the moment when the shadow closed the door, Tian gently pressed his hand to the side and turned on the light in the car. The suddenly bright light lit up the dark box in an instant, and let him see that standing at the gate, he was a boy of 14 or 15 years old. However, this guy looked as if he had just climbed out of the soil, and his whole body was covered with dust. It's the guy who stole the vault. The moment Tian sees the boy, he immediately senses the fluctuation of Fenglingen and Tullingen from each other's body. In addition, the boy's disheartened face makes him sure that he is the one who escaped from the police's encirclement. Be honest, don't move, don't say anything, otherwise, I'll kill you. Seeing that the light in the box was shining, the young man quickly lowered his head and took out a piece of black cloth from his pocket. After blocking half of his face, he rubbed his hand and along his fingertips, a small wind blade appeared. Immediately, he glared at Yi Tian and Ning Shui fiercely and cheered coldly. You, kill us, with this little thing in your hand? When Yi Tian heard this, he looked at the boy in surprise. He was shocked that he had two kinds of secret skills perfectly condensed in such a short time after the other party's body changed. At the same time, he raised his eyebrow and gave a playful smile. Haha, it's good. With this thing in my hand, it's enough to clean up you too. Hearing Yi Tian's words, the young man's face sank, his hand raised, the wind blade roared out, and immediately fell heavily on the platform in the middle of the carriage. In an instant, a half-foot deep gap appeared on the original stainless steel table. This boy, there are some evil ways. Yi Tian raises his eyebrow slightly. The wind blade of this young man is stronger than Ning Shui. You know, Ning Shui is taught by himself, and the breath of this young man is obviously that his body has only undergone metamorphosis for a short time. Besides the spirit root breath, the cultivation breath is low and low. How's it going? I'm afraid. I advise you two to be honest. Don't move or shout. Let me sit here for a while. I'll get off at the next stop. If you two are honest, I will not only help you, but also give you some benefits. Seeing this, the young man shows his contented face. After drinking to Yi Tian and Ning Shui, he immediately takes out a gold bar from his pocket and throws it to Yi Tian's bed. However, although the young man's speech sounds fierce, it gives people a sense of being in a good tune. Moreover, the look from his eyes is even more flustered and fierce. Especially his trembling fingers show that he is definitely not a murderer like Li Hualian, but should be doing this kind of thing for the first time. However, although the young man's action is naive, if this big stick and carrots action is met by ordinary people, maybe it will really be bluffed by him, so he will be obedient. It's a pity that the person he meets is not someone else, but Yi Tian. If you have a small wind blade, you don't know who you are. Do you feel invincible? Yi Tian looked at the gray-faced, fierce young man with great interest. After a smile, he gently raised his hand, and a huge wind blade suddenly appeared in the air. When the blade pointed directly at the young man, he faintly said, "My wind blade is so big, do you think I'm proud of it?" He can even refine the wind blade, and his concise wind blade is so huge. Seeing this, the young man was completely dumbfounded for a moment. He looked at the huge wind blade and the small wind blade with only one finger in his hand. His head was buzzing and his body was shaking. Even if I killed him, I didn't expect that I was so unlucky. I managed to escape the blocking of the police officers and pushed the door open. But I didn't expect that when I pushed the door open, I would encounter a similar one, and a much stronger one than myself. Next breath, without any hesitation, the boy turned and wanted to slide towards the outside of the soft sleeper carriage. When did I say, "Can you go?" But without waiting for him to turn around, Yi Tian cheers coldly. At the same time, his mind is like a sea, pressing towards the boy. In an instant, the terrifying pressure immediately lowered the young man's body and made his legs soft. Then he knelt down on the ground, and his head was pressed against the ground by the invisible force. What's more terrifying to the young man is that he is facing such cruel treatment, but there is no idea of resistance and struggle in his heart. It's like an invisible force has directly extinguished this idea. At a young age, if you don't learn well and have some skills, you just want to sneak around. How did your parents teach you? Closely following, Yi Tian looks at this youth, the face is full of anger and speechless shake head, Wei. This young man is very gifted. He not only became a double spirit root, but also got the ability to operate after the spirit root became a creature. It's amazing. Such talent could have achieved many incredible achievements, but this guy went astray and became a thief. He also stole the bank's treasury. If he was caught, he would be killed by a bullet. Don't talk about my parents. But almost at the moment when Yi Tian's voice fell, the boy who couldn't make any rebellious move suddenly burst into a rage and struggled hard to denounce Yi Tian. Why, you can do something wrong, and you can't be told? When Yi Tian saw the boy's appearance, he gave a light smile, and his mind increased. After he put the boy on the floor of the carriage, he saw that his eyes were still red, and he was staring at himself and biting his lips. He couldn't help raising his eyebrows and said, "How, do you steal the treasury because it's related to your parents? What do you have to do with me? Young age is not big, but temper is really not small. Here ye Tian this, will head a twist, back of the head to ye Tian, cold way. It's none of my business? It happened that I knew those policemen who were looking for you everywhere, so I called them and asked them to come and arrest you and send you to prison." Leaf Day hears a sound, pick eyebrow a smile, light way. What's going to be in jail? Those prisons can't hold me. Young man's temper is very stubborn, and his ability is very confident, after hearing this, not to be outdone. Yes? Can you still run if you are put in a prison made of pure metal? The Leaf Day hears a sound, pick eyebrow a smile, looking at youth, light way. After a few moments, he sneered again and said, I don't care. Even if you lock me up, I won't tell you where the money and gold bars are in the vault. If you don't say it, there's no way? Your cash and gold bars, if I guess correctly, should be outside the bank now? At that time, I'll find a few people to dig, and naturally I'll dig out all the cash and gold bars. The facial expression on Leaf Day face is more and more playful, light way. You how do you know everything? Who the hell are you? Yi Tian's words fell for a moment, and the whole young man was almost dull. He looked at Yi Tian with a face full of disbelief. He really can't understand how Yi Tian's understanding of himself has reached such an incredible level. He even knows exactly where he hid his cash and gold bars. This situation is completely unexpected to him. You seem to have made a mistake. I am the one asking the question now, and you are only qualified to answer my question. Yi Tian hears the young man's words, raises eyebrow light smile, calm way. A word fell, the youth immediately became silent lips closed, but still not willing to say a word. No? Then I have to call the police, but I advise you to think clearly that as long as you are locked up, you can either stay in it for a lifetime, or you can be sentenced to death. If you do all this for your parents, you can imagine how desperate your parents would be if they heard these things. Yi Tian saw the boy's appearance, word by word, to induce the boy to tell the truth. From the young man's look, he could see that he did not mean to do evil, but had to, so he wanted to find out the secret. Yi Tian's principle has always been that he will never let a bad man go, but he will never wrong a good man. If young people use their ability to do evil unintentionally for some compelling reasons, then they will not be punished for evil. Of course, if the young man is not willing to cooperate, and the truth is not as he thought, then he does not mind, let the young man taste the disaster of prison. Young man lying on the ground, eyes changeable, obviously there is a hesitation in the heart, thinking, whether to tell the truth to Yi Tian. Gulu gulu. At this time, the boy's stomach suddenly purred. Obviously, this guy hasn't eaten for some time, otherwise, he won't be hungry. These things are for you to eat. Ning Shui heard the voice, immediately smile at the young man, and then take out a pile of snacks, tear open the package, hand it to the young man's eyes, broke the silence, and then said with a smile, Yi Tian is not a bad man, you listen to him, answer his questions well, if you are not wrong, he will not do you anything. Hearing the sound, the young man grabbed those biscuits and other spirit stones and wolfed them into his mouth. He choked and almost rolled his eyes. Eat slowly, no one will compete with you. Yi Tian looks at the boy's appearance, can't help but smile bitterly and shake the picture, and then release the divine idea to a share of suppression, pacify way. The young man didn't know how long he was hungry. He almost piled up snacks like a hill. Just in the blink of an eye, he was swallowed by the young man. He took the water from Ning Shui and drank 2 mouthfuls of it. Then he felt shy and embarrassed and said, thank you. If you want to thank me, tell Yi Tian all about it. Ning Shui looks at the boy sympathetically, only from the young man's eating appearance, we can see that he should be hungry for many days, and the clothes he is wearing are very simple, which is the kind of poor children. Of course, what's more important is that the young man only threatened them by hitting the table with a wind blade before, and did not directly commit murder. Moreover, the police officer also said that only the cash and gold bars were lost, and the security personnel were not hurt. All this shows that although the boy did something wrong, there is still a trace of kindness in his heart. Since he has good intentions, it shows that he is not incurable. If he can help him to have a good man in the world, Yi Tian or Ning Shui will not mind giving this young man a chance. Now that you've had enough to eat and drink, can you tell us why you're stealing the vault? Tian sees this and looks at the young man and says with a smile. My father and my mother had a car accident, and now they are all in the hospital. They need treatment. There is no money at home to treat them. I have no choice but to do so. The boy stretched out his hand and rubbed it hard toward his nose. Then the sound of the urn came out. Just, when the words export, the eye socket is actually slightly a little red. This kind of bad-tempered and obstinate teenagers are mostly like this. Others always think that they are very disobedient, but in fact, people like them are the most emotional. If they are given a little warmth, they will hold them tightly in their hands for a long time. There is a reason. Hearing the sound, Tian looked at the boy's eyes and could not help showing some compassion. Parents had a car accident, the burden of treatment, all fell on such a young man, he is really no way. Tian asked himself that if he was himself, he would do the same as the boy. I ask you, what's the matter with your abilities? What's more, how did you learn to cohere the wind blade and be able to escape? Next, Tian looks at the boy and asks him the biggest confusion in his heart. You know, whether it's wind blade or earth evasion, it's a kind of art. Although people who change heaven and earth, or who have the spirit root, will have some incredible abilities in the eyes of ordinary people, most of them are just like Ning Shui and can only run faster. But the boy, obviously, got some other chances besides these. I don't know what's going on with these abilities. As soon as I wake up from sleep, I have them myself. As for the wind blade and two done, when I woke up and went to catch fish by the river in order to stew fish soup for my parents, I caught a big turtle and cut a piece of cloth out of its belly. It said. Now the boy has become extremely honest. After hearing Tian's words, he tells the truth without thinking. The secret of catching fish. Tian can't help but have some silly eyes. This young man's chance is really against heaven. It seems that after the change of heaven and earth, Tian also appeared. In this world, there will be some lucky people who are favored by heaven and earth. And the remains of the mythical age will also be revealed in the world, and will be obtained by the world. I know I've done something wrong. I'm willing to go to jail, but can you help me take out some of the cash and gold bars I buried and send them to the hospital to treat my parents? When Tian sighs in his heart, the young man suddenly looks at Tian with a look of entreaty. No. The money doesn't belong to you. It's someone else's money. I can't promise you to help you generously. Hearing this, Tian shook his head cleanly, but when the boy was in despair, he showed a smile on his face and said, But I don't mind. I'll help you with my own money. This is Tian. When he is weak, he will not help others generously, but he doesn't mind using his own strength to help others. But it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of money. Hearing the sound, the boy looked at Tian in a daze. After a long time, he was a little nervous. Compared with 2 lives, more money is a lot of money. Tian waved his hand with a smile, and then said to Ning Shui, when you get to the next stop, you go back to Nanhai first, and I'll take him back to Jiangcheng. I'll go back after it's done. Ning Shui hears that she wants to follow Tian to Jiangcheng, but when she talks about it, she also knows that it's unrealistic. After all, Shueji ointment is still waiting for her to take care of it. Although the jade mine problem has been solved, she still has to choose the right person to connect with. Well, I'll wait for you in Nanhai. Think of here, rather Snow reluctantly saw Leaf Day one eye, slowly way. While taking advantage of the time when the train arrives at the next station, Tian also asks about the youth. It turned out that his name was Zheng Tong. He was 13 years old. He was in junior high school in Jiangcheng, and his grades were excellent. He had to leave school because his parents had a car accident. He took care of his parents and ran west to find a way to cure them. However, Zheng Tong's parents are so seriously injured that they are still in a coma. In addition, after the incident, the person who caused the accident has already escaped and found the object of claim. Although Zheng Tong's school has made a donation to him because of Zheng Tong's affairs, and the hospital has also reduced and remitted a lot of medical expenses considering the situation of their home, but the reduced and remitted money still needs donation money, for their current situation is just like a drop in the bucket, the gap is too big. It is precisely because of this that Jiang Tong finds himself in a desperate situation. When he finds himself with this powerful ability, he chooses to take the risk and put his idea in the bank vault. Then he really lets him get a sum of cash and gold bars from it. However, Jiang Tong didn't expect that the alarm system of the bank was so powerful. A moment later, he found the theft case. More fortunately, Jiang Tong meets Yi Tian on the way to escape. Otherwise, he makes a big mistake. That is to say, a slip will become eternal hatred. A moment later, the train arrives at the next station. Before getting off the train, Yi Tian tells Ning Shui a few words. Then he calls Nie Fu from the next carriage and asks her to move here from the next carriage to protect Ning Shui. After that, Yi Tian takes Jiang Tong off the train. Soon, they left the railway station and came to a secluded alley. Are you going to kill me here? Jiang Tong looks at the dark and quiet streets around him. He shivers and looks at Yi Tian timidly. What do you think I'm going to kill you here? The Leaf Day hears a sound, can't help but get a zhang, pick-to-pick eyebrow, looking at River Pupil, surprised inquiry asks away. Isn't that what they do on TV and in books? You don't want that elder sister to think that you are a bad person, and you don't want to kill people in front of her, so you deliberately pretend to be a good person, and then you take people to a quiet place to kill them. Jiang Tong smells speech, immediately looking at Yi Tian, word-by-word explanation way. I said, you'd better watch less of those strange TV dramas and novels in the future. I want to kill you. It's so complicated. Why ask you all kinds of secrets? When you come in, it's easier to burn you to ashes with a little fire. Yi Tian couldn't help laughing and crying when he heard these words. However, at this moment, he finally understood why he thought Jiang Tong was so strange. After a long time, he learned from TV series and novels. Moreover, after hearing this, he understood why Jiang Tong was walking with more and more heavy steps and slower speed. It turned out that the boy thought he was going to kill him in a quiet place. If you don't kill me, why did you bring me here? Jiang Tong hears that Yi Tian says he won't kill himself. He can't help but be confused. He looks at Yi Tian blankly and says blankly. My purpose here is very simple. I want to take you back to Jiangcheng as soon as possible. Before you make a big mistake, I want to help you clean your ass so as not to cause you any unnecessary trouble in the future. Yi Tian smiles bitterly, shakes his head and explains to Jiang Tong slowly. There is no car here. Jiang Tong is at a loss. He can't understand Yi Tian's meaning. The alley is empty and dark. It doesn't seem to be hiding any means of transportation. Can't you go to Jiangcheng without a car? Today, I'll show you what a real cultivator and a strong one looks like. Yi Tian chuckles, and his mind moves. The fierce sword flies out of the dantian, and clanks. This is flying sword. Jiang Tong opens his mouth wide and looks at the flying sword in disbelief. Even if the world changes, his body has also undergone a transformation, with the past can only be seen in television and novels inside the powerful ability, but his heart still can't believe that there is a flying sword in the world. Come up. I'll take you to Jiangcheng. Yi Tian looks at Jiang Tong's excited and shocked appearance. With a faint smile, he takes his arm and jumps to the flying sword. Flying sword. It's really a flying sword. My God. Jiang Tong stands on the flying sword and moves gently. When he finds that he is really suspended in the air, he immediately looks at Yi Tian with great excitement. The haze brought by his parents' serious illness is swept away. The child's curious and excitable nature is now fully displayed in him. However, before he finished his sentence, he was deliberately teased by Yi Tian, and suddenly turned his flying sword and swept to the sky. In a flash, the wild air and the sharp wind immediately took his voice back to his stomach. However, although he took a sip of the cold wind, Jiang Tong's face was not unhappy at all. Instead, his eyes were wide open and looked around happily. He even had the courage to look carefully at the ground under the sword. He was sure that he was really shuttling through the high clouds. The excitement in his heart was beyond recovery. At the point, eyebrows, 5 fingers pinched tightly. Do you want to have such a flying sword in the future? Yi Tian looks at Jiang Tong, excited incomparable appearance, immediately, looking at him light smile way. Yes, Jiang Tong hears the sound, without thinking, he nods and says in a loud voice. Flying with the sword is the most anticipated and irresistible thing for all the young people full of imagination. What's the difference between such strength and the legendary Immortal? If you want to, would you like to worship me as your teacher and practice with me, and I can give you a flying sword when your practice is successful? Tian looked at the eyes full of hope and said with a smile. Although Jiang Tong's fortune is extraordinary, he has learned these two skills in such a short time without cutting bones and washing marrow. Moreover, he uses them skillfully. In addition, he is a rare double spirit pulse, which makes Tian love talents. This young man is not bad in nature. He will not go astray if he guides him in his cultivation. However, if he is allowed to grow savagely, with his extreme character, he will not do anything in the future. In case he joins the ranks of those who come, it will be true. Therefore, Tian wants to accept his apprentice, and list him under his own door to become his own disciple. In this way, not only can he not waste Jiang Tong's talent, but also can make him kind and bright, without worrying about going astray. To be a teacher? Jiang Tong can't help losing his mind when he hears the news. He didn't expect that things in TV and books would happen to him again. But thinking of Tian's means and his attitude towards himself, Jiang Tong immediately fell on his knees on the flying sword without any hesitation and said solemnly, "I'll see you, master. Get up and enter my door. Courtesy is not in your body, but in your heart." The leaf day hand empty a whisk, will river pupil from the ground after the pull-up, light way. As he said, he didn't care about these empty rites, but more about the good and evil of his disciple's heart. For example, he took Jiang Tong as his disciple. What he valued more was not his qualifications, but what he did for his critically ill parents. "Yes, master." Jiang Tong stood up, respectfully nodded yes, and then, looking at Tian with some hope, said, "Master, am I the elder martial brother?" "Elder martial brother? You think too much. Now you're just a little younger martial brother. On top of you, there's a big elder martial sister." Tian smiles lightly when he hears the words. In a moment, he can't help thinking about her dark cheek, but she always smiles with banter. If she knows she has a little younger martial brother now, she doesn't know how happy she should be. She's afraid she'll jump 3 feet high. Then she starts to think about how to let Jiang Tong serve her elder martial sister. It's younger martial brother, however, younger martial brother is also good. Jiang Tong was disappointed to hear that his generation was so small. But immediately, the disappointment in his eyes was replaced by excitement. After breaking through the 9 layers of the cave, especially the whole body mana has been transformed under the action of the natural spirit jade, Tian's ability of the sword has been greatly improved, from the previous short-distance flight to the long-distance sword flight from one city to another. After a short video clip, Tian and Jiang Tong arrive at the sky above Jiangcheng, and then under the guidance of Jiang Tong, they land in a remote area nearest to his parents' hospital. "Let's go, take me to the bank first, solve your problem, and then let's find a place to eat." Tian Chao looked at Jiang Tong and said with a smile. Jiang Tong hears the sound, lowers his head, embarrassed, and then honestly takes Tian to the bank where he committed the crime. A moment later, they appeared in front of the bank. At this moment, the police car was surrounded by 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. The red and blue lights were flashing, which made people feel extremely uneasy. Jiang Tong, in particular, looks at the scene in front of him. Although he didn't care much before, he still can't help being timid at the moment. Then he holds Tian's sleeve tightly and looks at the scene in front of him timidly. He can't imagine what will happen if he is caught and waiting for him, and how his parents should be distressed. Remember that feeling, don't forget. When it's not in line with one's ability, doing something beyond one's ability is such a sense of panic. Tian smiles and pats Jiang Tong's shoulder, word by word, slowly. "Master, I won't do it anymore." Jiang Tong shamefully lowered his head, and then hardpoint, said he remembered Tian's words. "If you know what's wrong and you can correct it, you can't do much good." Tian nodded faintly, followed closely, his mind moved, and then covered the soil layer in front of him. Next breath, his mind locked the cash and gold bars that Jiang Tong buried in the depth of the soil layer. Then, he suddenly operated the secret art of Earth Avalanche. Boom! The secret operation, the field suddenly came a terrible trembling sound, followed by, the original flat earth, like the arrival of an earthquake, opened a crack about 1 meter wide, just buried Jiang Tong in the soil of cash and gold bars, appeared in front of everyone. Master, it's amazing. Jiang Tong stares at the scene in front of him. His eyes are full of disbelief. He really didn't expect that Tian could not even ask him, so he could easily find out the cash and gold bars hidden in the soil. Let's go and have some food first, and then go and see about your parents. Immediately after that, Tian flicks the gold bar that Jiang Tong has thrown to them before, and also flicks it into the pile of cash and gold bars. Taking advantage of the moment when the police are distracted, he takes Jiang Tong to leave quickly. After leaving this area, he laughs. Well. Jiang Tong nodded and looked at Tian. He was full of admiration and said, I know there is a lotus root soup shop nearby. It tastes good. My parents used to take me to eat, and the uncle who opened the shop was very kind-hearted. Every time I put a lot of ribs in my share. Okay, take me to try it. Tian smiles, indicating that Jiang Tong is leading the way. After learning about the cash and gold bars, Jiang Tong obviously feels relieved. His teenage nature is revealed again. After a while, he takes Tian to a restaurant that looks very old. Small red coal stoves, rows of steaming show, pink lotus roots and ribs in show. This is the most difficult bowl of soup for Jiangqing people in winter. Jiang Tong, you haven't been here for a long time. How are your parents? Are you all right? Sure enough, as soon as he saw Jiang Tong, the stall owner, who was dozing off in his chair, woke up immediately. After a few questions, he looked at Tian warily and asked Jiang Tong, who is he? Your brother? Why haven't you seen it before? He's not my brother, he's my master. My parents are a little better now. Jiang Tong hears the stall owner talking about his parents, and his face is a little dejected, but he politely tells the other party about his relationship with Tian. Master? The stall owner can't help laughing when he hears the news. At Tian's age, he seems to be a college student, while Jiang Tong is a junior high school student. These two people are brothers. Others believe that no one can believe them. Moreover, what can such a young man teach Jiang Tong? This young man, shouldn't he be a gangster on the street? While no one is in charge of Jiang Tong, do you want to hook him to do something bad? However, this young man doesn't look like a bad man. Immediately after that, an idea suddenly appeared in the stall owner's head, but after seeing Tian's appearance, this doubt can't help dispelling. Boss, 2 bowls of lotus root soup. At this time, Tian is looking at the stall owner, politely smile, find a seat to sit down, smile. Although his cultivation today has no fear of cold and heat, and he can't feel the cold in winter in Jiangcheng, it's really a pleasure to drink such a bowl of hot lotus root soup on such a cold winter night. Good. After hearing this, the stall owner wakes up. He looks at Tian suspiciously and vigilantly. Then he picks up a pair of tongs, holds 2 cans of lotus root soup, and puts some chives as ornaments. In a moment, he sends them to Tian and Jiang Tong. However, just as Jiang Tong said, when he got to Jiang Tong's share, the boss fished out more ribs from the big pot next to him and put them in. There was more meat and less lotus root. Not only that, after the lotus root soup came over, the boss did not leave, but sat beside them. Then he looked at Jiang Tong with a smile and asked with a smile, Tong Tong, what did your master teach you? I just worshipped my master this evening, and my master hasn't had time to teach me anything. Jiang Tong frankly shook his head and said, I'm going to visit my teacher in the evening? The stall owner was stunned and looked at Tian's eyes. He became more and more vigilant. It's absolutely not a good thing to collect apprentices on the street at such a big night. Although this young man does not look like a bad man, he will not write the word bad man on his face. Moreover, only this kind of person who does not look like a bad man can cheat people more easily. Tong Tong, it's a big thing to visit a teacher. I don't think you should worry too much. You'd better wait for your parents and ask them for their opinions. After all, there are many people in all kinds of society, many of them seem to be for your own good, but in fact, they don't think that's what they think. Think of here, the stall owner immediately looked at Jiang Tong, as if unintentionally, painstakingly advised, and speak, eyes as intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Tian. That appearance is simply bad, not to point to the nose of the leaf day, scold him as a bad person with bad intentions. Master is a good man. He won't cheat me. Although the river pupil is young, but also heard out the meaning of the words in the stall owner, hurried to defend for the leaf day way. I don't mean that. I mean, you still have to discuss with your parents about such a big matter. You are still young. They must agree to do something. Booth boss will think of Jiang Tong will put his heart out, face embarrassed to see Yi Tian one eye way. Don't worry. After dinner here, Tong Tong and I went to see his parents. Even if I want to accept Tong Tong as an apprentice, I must wait until Tong Tong's parents get better and get their consent before accepting him as an apprentice. Yi Tian doesn't know what the owner of the restaurant means, but he also knows that he is kind-hearted. He is thinking about Jiang Tong. He is worried that he is too young to be hoodwinked by bad people and will do something bad, so he doesn't have any heart to blame. He laughs and explains to the stall owner. I can see from my face that you are not a villain, little brother. When the stall owner heard Yi Tian's words, he immediately sighed with relief. However, he was still worried that Yi Tian deliberately used these words to appease him. In fact, he had ulterior motives. He immediately said with a smile, "It's just too late. There's no business. Wait a minute. I'll go to see Tong Tong's parents with my little brother. They didn't take care of my business before. I've long wanted to go, but I haven't found an opportunity." The stall owner is a warm-hearted man. There are not many such people now. When Yi Tian heard this, he felt a sigh in his heart, and then nodded to him with a smile, saying good. He agreed? Is this young man really the same as what Jiang Tong said? He is not a bad man, or is he so relieved because he is not worried about revealing his secrets? Booth boss heard Leaf Day so crisp agreed down, not from some surprise to see him one eye, in the heart secretly mutter. Eat quickly. After dinner, let's go to the hospital to see your parents. Yi Tian smiles, and then pats Jiang Tong's head and says. Jiang Tong hummed, and then began to lower his head, quickly put the ribs into his mouth. Jiang Tong listens to this young man. When the stall owner saw the scene in front of him, he was even more surprised. You know, in his impression, Jiang Tong is a very stubborn child. He doesn't even listen to his parents' words, but now he even listens to Yi Tian's words. Although it is true that such a major event as a parent's car accident will affect a child's character, it does not seem that the impact will be so rapid and so great. Although I feel puzzled, the stall owner is still ready to clean up the things on the stall. When Yi Tian and Jiang Tong finish their meal, they can close the door and go to the hospital with them to see the situation. Boss, a bowl of lotus root soup. But just then, along the street, a middle-aged bald man, who was full of wine and could not walk steadily, sat down in a chair and said in a loud voice. I'm sorry, I'm closed here. Would you like to change your shop? 200 meters further, there is also a soup shop. After hearing this, the stall owner looks at Yi Tian and Jiang Tong in embarrassment. He is worried that if he greets the guest, he will not be able to go to the hospital with Yi Tian and Jiang Tong. He says with a smile. Although he is a small businessman, he usually doesn't drive his guests out easily, otherwise, he won't keep a stall by himself until now, but he can't make all the money, but if he makes a few bowls of lotus root soup, he will watch a child go astray with the bad guys, or even have a more unbearable accident things, then, he can't forgive himself all his life. What do you mean, grandson? Why can they sit here and drink lotus root soup, but I can't? You said, do you look down on me? When the middle-aged man heard this, he immediately burst into a rage, patted the table heavily, reached out and pointed to the stall owner, and made a big curse. No, I'm really busy today. Hearing this, the stall owner immediately panicked and waved his hand. It's okay. Let's greet the guests. Tong Tong and I are here when you are finished. Let's go there together. Yi Tian sees this, blunt booth boss to smile, way. He felt that the boss was really a rare warm-hearted good man and didn't want to embarrass the other party. Okay, thank you. The stall owner really didn't expect that Yi Tianfei didn't take the opportunity to leave. Instead, he offered to wait. He was surprised to see Yi Tian, but he didn't care to think so much. He rushed to the drunk middle-aged man and said with a smile, just a moment, I'll give you soup. Grandson, what do you mean? I can't say it. He can say it. Do you look down on me? However, when the middle-aged man heard this from the stall owner, his face became more angry. He slapped the table and said angrily, I really didn't mean that. I just had an appointment with them. I am a small businessman. You are a guest and a god. How dare I look down on you? Hearing this, the stall owner repeatedly waved his hand and laughed, explaining, Fart your mother. You think I don't know, you just look down on me. And you all look down on me. Unfortunately, the middle-aged man didn't listen to his explanation at all. After hearing this, he slapped the table heavily and roared, Brother, I really don't mean that. Please calm down. I'll give you this lotus root soup for nothing today. Isn't that okay? The stall owner listened to this voice, although he was a little angry, but he didn't want to see a drunkard in the same way and tried to laugh. For nothing? I won't drink it if you give it to me for nothing, the middle-aged man roared and slapped heavily on the table. He said angrily, Since you look down on me, I'll let you know my strength today. I'll see who dares to look down on me in the future. When the stall owner heard this, he couldn't laugh or cry. He just wanted to say a few words of apology, but when the words came to his mouth, the whole person was suddenly dull. Not only him, Tian's eyes, at this moment, also showed the color of surprise. I saw, along with the middle-aged man patted on the table of the hand position, at this moment, there is a wisp of smoke. That appearance, as if a piece of charcoal fell on the table, is constantly burning the same. However, it is obviously not the charcoal that leads to all this, but the middle-aged man's hand, which is constantly turning red with the speed visible to the naked eye and seems to turn into charcoal. This. The stall owner looked at the middle-aged man's hand. At this moment, he was completely confused. He really did not expect that there would be such a strange thing in this world. But he can be sure that all this is not magic, nor is it his illusion, because no matter what magic or illusion is, it is impossible to create the burning smell of the tabletop, and the wooden table becomes a picture shrouded by fire. Ha ha ha, now, do you dare to look down on me? Do you dare to look down on me? The middle-aged man looked at the stall owner's stunned appearance. His expression was even more excited to the extreme. His hand raised, from the palm, unexpectedly emerged a small fire. The small flame, though very weak, made people feel that if it fell on the table, it could cause a terrible fire. Put on. This is completely beyond the normal understanding of the picture. At first appeared, the stall owner immediately knees a soft, kneeling on the ground, all over, shivering, crazy shudder. It's really Huelingen. Hearing this, Tian's eyes changed slightly, and immediately determined what happened to the middle-aged man. Not only that, but he also understood the whole story. Looking at the ragged dress of the middle-aged man, I'm afraid he belonged to the kind of person who had been frustrated in the past and was looked down upon everywhere. Now, with the change of heaven and earth, he suddenly has this legendary means. Naturally, he wants to sweep away the past frustration and live a glorious life. In order to celebrate, he goes to get drunk. Then, when he happens to encounter the stall owner to contradict him, he becomes arrogant and wants to take the stall owner to show his extraordinary. Kowtow, call grandfather. Otherwise, I'll set fire to your broken shop and burn you to ashes as well. When the middle-aged man saw the stall owner's appearance, he became more and more arrogant, grinned and said, No, don't. The stall owner shuddered, and his lips moved a few times. He was about to beg for a voice. The middle-aged man looked down at the stall owner kneeling at his feet. At this moment, he was extremely happy. When did he live such a long life? When did he ever have such an experience of making others kneel at his feet? This kind of feeling even made him feel that he was like a high god, and the stall owner was just a tiny mole ant. As long as he moved his feet, he could easily trample him to death. This kind of big man's feeling led him completely intoxicated, indulge in it, simply can't extricate himself. He knows that such a person is not what he can deal with. As long as he annoys the other party, I'm afraid he and his shop will be completely ruined. Whether you can be looked down upon is never what you can get by scaring others, but what you have done. You've lived so long, don't you even understand the truth? But at this time, along the middle-aged man's back, suddenly came Tian's indifferent voice. What are you? Dare you talk to me like that? Kneel down now, or I'll order with you. When the middle-aged man heard Yi Tian's words, he burst into a rage. His eyes were almost bursting with flames. He held the flame in his palm and turned his head to look at Yi Tian. He cried angrily in a cold voice. Think of me? Do you really have the ability? Haven't you ever thought about the difference between what you do now and the people who used to treat you like this? You think you are showing your strength. In my opinion, on the contrary, it is a manifestation of your inferiority. Yi Tian looks at the middle-aged man indifferently, sighs and shakes his head. It's normal for an ordinary person to suddenly acquire this incredible power and show some arrogance. He doesn't think it's anything. Just like when he first came to Fanken Lingyu and made the first pill, he wanted to let the whole world know how strong his potential is. But at that time, he just wanted to let those who were more powerful than him know how strong he was, and there was a possibility to trample them under his feet. He did not show his own strength and satisfy his vanity by bullying the weak like this middle-aged man. Presumptuous, who gave you the courage to talk to me like this? It seems that you really want to die. Yi Tian's words, word by word, like a dagger, pierced into the middle-aged man's heart that tried to hide his inferiority, which made him have a kind of disguise that was exposed, and his whole body was naked and exposed in front of people. He felt embarrassed. Immediately, after yelling at Yi Tian's exhausted voice, his hand trembled, and the group of weak flames immediately twisted to his face. Yi Tian flies over to burn him to ashes. However, as Yi Tian can see, this middle-aged man's means is not to have the ability to manipulate Lingzhen like Zhang Tong, but to operate Lingzhen in the shallowest and least inflow way. Little brother, Tong Tong run. The stall owner sees this scene and shouts to Yi Tian and Zhang Tong, hoping that they can leave as soon as possible. But when he spoke, what made him feel particularly puzzled was that in the face of the terrible means of middle-aged people, Zhang Tong's face was not afraid at all, but calm, as if he had been used to it. Not only that, he didn't know whether it was his own illusion or something. He even felt that he saw a kind of pity and sympathy from Zhang Tong's eyes. As if, in the eyes of Zhang Tong, this middle-aged man is a real wretch. Shwa! And at this time, when the fire came, Yi Tian lightly and casually raised his hand, and then pinched the weak fire in his palm. What's more amazing is that the flame that can burn the desktop into black coke did not show half of its power after it fell into his hand. Even the skin of the palm of his hand was not burned. You. The stall owner even looks silly, not to mention the middle-aged man who already thinks he is invincible at this moment. He looks at Yi Tian in a dazed way. He can't believe it in his eyes. He has reached the point where there is no way to add it, or he is a little silly. He can't understand, his so overbearing means, to Yi Tian's hands, how to look, as if even 3-year-old children are not as good. You are too weak. Yi Tian looks at the middle-aged man with a faint smile. Then he pinches his fingers tightly. Hiss. 5 fingers pinched for a moment, along Yi Tian's 5 fingers, immediately came the sound of the flame like being doused out by a ladle of water, and when his palm spread out again, along the palm of his hand, there was no trace of the flame, everything disappeared. The middle-aged man was completely stupid. Not long ago, he felt that he was as powerful as a god, overlooking all living beings, and that everyone would be trampled under his feet like a mole ant. But at this moment, he felt that he had changed back into a tiny mole ant, and Yi Tian was the real god. I just have a little ability, and I can't wait to bully the weak to show my strength. People like you don't deserve everything you get now. God give it to you, I'll take it back. And at this time, Yi Tian's step as a flash, has come to the middle-aged man's body, immediately, hand gently out, fell on him. With such a light touch, the middle-aged man immediately felt that there was something missing in his body. When he tried his best to feel the warm fire in his body, raised his hand, and wanted to gather fire in his palm, he found that no matter how hard he tried, he could not gather fire smoothly and could not feel the giving. I have a strong and confident fire. No way, how could it be? What on earth have you done? The middle-aged man spread out his palm, tried to hold it tightly, then released it in a hurry. After dozens of times, he found that there was still no fire. Then he roared to Yi Tian with anger and panic. That flame, as he feels oneself from the frustrated person to the hope fire of the superior person, but now, was mercilessly poured out by Yi Tian. Take back something that shouldn't belong to you. Take care of yourself. Yi Tian looks at the middle-aged person indifferently, light way. It's really not a big deal that a person suddenly becomes powerful and has extraordinary power. But if he highlights his own strength by bullying the weak, then he doesn't deserve to have that powerful power. Moreover, Yi Tian knows that there will be more and more such things after the change of heaven and earth. People like middle-aged people will also emerge one after another. But these people, it's better to pray that they won't meet themselves. Otherwise, God will give them, and Yi Tian will help God take them back. You are jealous of me. You are jealous that I have the possibility of being stronger than you. That's why you treat me like this, right? The middle-aged man roared wildly, yelling at Yi Tian, to satisfy his ridiculous self-esteem through such means. Ah, I'm jealous of you. When Yi Tian heard this, he couldn't help laughing. His hand was as light as the fire. In a moment, along the palm of his hand, a cloud of gold wings formed by the fire moved. His golden eyes were staring at the middle-aged man. It seemed that as long as his wings were lightly fanned, only the sparks could burn him to ashes. Put on, the middle-aged man looked at the terrible flame. His angry face suddenly turned pale. He directly sat on the ground, shivering and sweating like rain. Compared with his little fire, this fire looks like the ancestor of fire. At this moment, the stall owner is completely dumbfounded, especially when he thinks of what he thought before. He even wants to slap himself in the face. With Yi Tian's power, if he wants to do something bad, can he use so much trouble? Just rely on his doubt, flick his finger twice, and he can turn himself into ashes. The fire I made is so big. Yi Tian raised his eyebrows and laughed, condescending, and said faintly, "Do you think I'm proud? Am I proud?" The middle-aged man stared at the golden black fire floating in the palm of Yi Tian's hand, shivering all over, sweating like rain, with fear in his eyes and even more admiration. How eager he is to have such powerful means as Yi Tian. If he has such ability, he can be a real man and trample other people under his feet like ants. He can become a powerful god who is really high and in charge of everything. Unfortunately, all this does not belong to him, but belongs to Yi Tian. Now, do you know what you should do? At this time, Yi Tian looked at the middle-aged man indifferently and said faintly, "Dong dong." After a word, the middle-aged man hurriedly kowtows to Yi Tian for 3 times, then turns his head and kowtows to the stall owner, and runs to the distance like a lost dog. He knew that as long as he was willing to move his fingers casually, Yi Tian could be crushed to death like an ant. Yi Tian looks at the figure of the middle-aged man fleeing, shakes his head, and does not choose to lay any heavy hand on him. The best punishment for this kind of person is to take away the capital that makes him arrogant and return to his original frustrated state. I'm afraid that this kind of punishment is more painful than killing him. However, what makes Yi Tian sigh is that after the change of heaven and earth, there must be a lot of people like middle-aged people. The stall owners are lucky to meet themselves, so they can be saved. But what will happen to those people who are not so lucky as the stall owners? The world is changing. A world completely different from the past is rolling like a mighty torrent. Everyone, whether willing or not, will fall into the torrent and drift with the current to find a new position. Little brother, no, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were an expert. What you said just now was unintentional. Please don't have the same opinion with me. At this time, the stall owner has trotted over and knelt down in front of Yi Tian. After a few respectful kowtows, he is grateful and ashamed. He just suspected that Yi Tian was a bad man, so he was wary of him, but he didn't want to get it. In the twinkling of an eye, Yi Tian saved his life. He could not imagine that if he had not met Yi Tian, he would have become a barbecue without any consciousness. Not only that, at this moment, he has already begun to envy Jiang Tong. He can worship such an expert as a teacher. You know, if he can become a disciple of such an expert and his future achievements, is there anything else to worry about? Moreover, if Yi Tian wants to accept his apprentices, he is absolutely blessed to be able to become his disciple. Even at this moment, he wants to worship Yi Tian as a teacher. It's just a small lift, it's nothing. Yi Tian chuckled, lifted the stall owner up from the ground and said, "And I also know that you are for Jiang Tong's sake. You are worried that he will be used by bad people because he is young and ignorant. Hearing this, the stall owner scratched his head with his hand and laughed twice. Okay, let's pack up. Let's see what's going on with Xiaotong's parents now. Yi Tian smiles and says. Soon, the stall owner packed up the things on the stall, and a group of 3 people rushed to the hospital. Along the way, Yi Tian learned some details about Tong Tong's parents' car accident from the stall owner. According to the stall owner, the driver who hit Tong Tong's parents was recognized by passers-by on the way of escape, just because he was the eldest son of the Zhou family in Jiangcheng, and the Zhou family's influence in Jiangcheng was a cover for the sky. The passerby who had promised to testify changed his tongue the next day, saying that he and the Zhou family had conflicts, so he deliberately splashed dirty water. The witness changed his tongue, and the scene of the accident was not monitored, so the police had no choice but to draw a conclusion that the driver of the accident had not been found. However, according to others, the perjury guy, after getting drunk with his friends, boasted that he had dinner with the eldest son of the Zhou family, and the Zhou family gave him a house as compensation. So it is. Yi Tian nodded slightly, knowing what the stall owner said. I'm afraid it is the closest to the truth. Don't worry. If it's true, whether he's the eldest son of the Zhou family or the Zhao family, Master will decide for you and your parents. Closely following, Leaf Day stretched out a hand to rub the small head of River Pupil, made assurance to him. Thank you, Master. Jiang Tong raised his hand and wiped his eyes. His voice choked. It has been a long time since his parents were in a coma. He has never felt the feeling of being cared for and being depended on. If he first worshipped Yi Tian as a teacher, he was only attracted by Yi Tian's powerful strength. Then at this moment, he really recognized Yi Tian as a master. A moment later, the group of 3 came to the hospital, and then came to the intensive care ward where Tong Tong's parents were. Hiss. After entering the ward, when Yi Tian opened Yuan Tian's eyes, he glanced at the man and woman lying on the bed, unconscious, and covered with plaster cast. Then he took a breath of cold air from the corner of his eyes. Yuan Tian's eyes shine through, and he sees that on Tong Tong's parents, now, there is almost no intact bone, and every bone presents the symptoms of comminution. Not only that, their internal organs have deviated from their position. What's more, there is a lot of congestion on the head of their parents, which oppresses their brain, causing them to fall into a coma and unable to wake up. Moreover, the retinas of both of them are semi-detached under the severe impact. If they are not treated in time, it will lead to retinal atrophy and unable to connect. Even if they wake up, they will also be injured, become blind. No, this troublemaker is really damned. And then, Yi Tian found a more surprising and angry situation. He found that some bone fragmentation of Tong Tong's parents was obviously not caused at one time, but 2 times. This situation means that Tong Tong's parents are not hit once, but twice. To put it in a more understandable way, after the accident, the person who caused the accident hit them for a second time. The reason why the other party would do this is very simple. I'm afraid that Tong Tong's parents saw the appearance of the person who caused the accident, recognized his identity, and the other party wanted to kill people, so that everything could be undone. This cruel and vicious, it is too numerous to write, but also people feel that even 1,000 cuts cannot be cured. Master, can you help my parents? At this time, Tong Tong looks at Yi Tian with his face full of hope, and his voice trembles. For Jiang Tong now, Yi Tian's existence is almost no different from that of an immortal. If Yi Tian can't help him, then I'm afraid there will be no other person in the world who can help him. Of course, after a while, they will wake up and become the same as before. Yi Tian nodded with a light smile, with a steady look. Although the situation of Tong Tong's parents is serious, it's just for ordinary people. For him, the Emperor of Dan, only a little means and a pill can help them wake up from coma without any sequelae. Master, please, help my parents. As soon as Jiang Tong heard Yi Tian's words, his face immediately showed ecstatic color, followed by, Pudong knelt down in front of Yi Tian, vowed, as long as you are willing to save them, I will listen to you in the future. You let me to the east, I absolutely dare not to the west. What you want me to do, I will do. Don't worry, Master will do what he promised you. Yi Tian hears Jiang Tong's words and shakes his head, but his heart is slightly moved. Jiang Tong's filial piety can be seen clearly. A little guy with such filial piety will never be a bad boy. Moreover, he knows that if God can give him a chance to let his parents live, no matter how harsh the conditions are, he will not hesitate to do it. Thank you, Master. Jiang Tong hears the sound, raises his sleeve, wipes the tears from the corner of his eyes, and looks at Yi Tian gratefully. Lead. Yi Tian waved his hand and motioned for Jiang Tong to stand beside him. He stood in front of his parents. Yuan Tian's eyes shone and followed him closely. He put his magic power into Jiang Tong's parents' body. Then, his hand gently rotated, and strands of magic power, like a fine thread, entered Jiang Tong's head, taking the blood stasis that oppressed the nerves in his brain. Then they follow the mana and slowly trickle out along their nostrils and mouths. Master. It's just that the picture of blood stasis flowing out of Tong's parents' ears, nose and mouth looks like blood from the 7 orifices. It's terrifying and ferocious. It's not like his condition has improved. On the contrary, his life is hanging on the line. It's even more critical than before, which makes Jiang Tong lose his voice. Don't worry, it won't get in the way. You can find some clean tissue to wipe off the congestion. Yi Tian looks at Jiang Tong, smiles and shakes his head, indicating that he doesn't need to be so nervous. Jiang Tong heard this, just slightly relieved, but there are still many worries in his heart, but still, according to the words, carefully wipe those congestion away. A moment later, Yi Tian discharged all the blood stasis in the brain of Tong's parents. Immediately after that, he took out the monkey wine from Zumaji, opened the bottle and fed them a little. Although monkey wine is a kind of wine, its degree is very low. It is not harmful for patients to drink it at all. The main reason why it can intoxicate people is the strong drug inside. The main function of this drug is to nourish the vitality of the human body, which is very suitable for the parents of Tong. Jiang Tong looks at Yi Tian's action, full of nervous color, carefully looking at his parents, gently calling, hoping that they can wake up. Well, Tong. Almost at the moment when he called out, a low voice came from his parents' mouth, and their eyelids blinked a few times, then their eyes opened and looked at Jiang Tong. Dad, Mom. Jiang Tong heard the sound, and then saw the picture. In a flash, the whole person was so happy that he couldn't help jumping up and cheering. Now I wake up. One side of the stall owner, to see the scene, is also surprised to open his mouth. His face cannot believe the color. If you don't see it with your own eyes, who can believe that 2 people who were in a coma because of a car accident could wake up so quickly? Tong, aren't we dreaming? And at this time, Tong's parents looked at Jiang Tong, and murmured with a dreamlike look. The moment they experienced the car accident, they thought that they would never see Jiang Tong in their whole life. Especially during this period, when they were in a coma, they felt that the world was very dark and quiet. They wanted to move, but they could not move. They felt that they had died and entered the netherworld. Now, suddenly wake up, see Jiang Tong, unavoidably let them too have a kind of illusion like a dream. Mom and Dad, it's not a dream, it's really me. You really wake up. Jiang Tong hears the sound and goes forward in a hurry. He holds his parents' hands, tears in his eyes, and says to them, It's really Tong, we actually woke up. Jiang Tong's parents feel the temperature in the palm of their hands, and they are completely sure that they are not dreaming. The people in front of them are really the 2 of them, even in a coma. In their dreams, there have been countless times, and they think that they will never meet again in this life. How did we wake up? Next, Jiang Tong's parents murmur. When they thought of the scene when the car was speeding towards them and then bumping them up, they felt that it was a miracle that they could wake up. Master, he woke you up. Jiang Tong heard this, quickly raised his hand, wiped the tears of the corner of his eyes, and then pulled Yi Tian to his parents, choked. Master, thank you. Jiang Tong's parents can't help feeling confused when they hear this. They don't understand why their son wants to call someone else's master, but they still want to struggle from the bed and thank Yi Tian. Please don't do that. I'm Tong's master. It's natural for master to help his apprentice save his parents. It's really nothing. Seeing this, Yi Tian quickly reaches out his hand and stops Jiang Tong's parents' action. He says with a smile, although the blood stasis in their brains has been discharged, and the vitality contained in the monkey wine is also moistening their bodies, the fracture of their bodies is too serious. If they struggle to get up now, it is bound to affect their injuries. Thank you. Jiang Tong's parents thank Yi Tian for his kindness. Then they look at Jiang Tong and say, Tong, When did you worship your master? Why don't we know? I just worship my master. Jiang Tong raises his hand and grabs the back of his head. He laughs. The main thing is to get your consent. If you don't think it's appropriate, Tong Tong doesn't worship his teacher, and it's nothing. Yi Tian also looks at Jiang Tong's parents and explains with a smile. Although he is really optimistic about Jiang Tong, he never does things that are hard for others. If Jiang Tong's parents refuse, he will not take Jiang Tong away from them by force, but he will sigh that he has no chance to be a teacher and apprentice. Brother Jiang, Sister Jiang, I tell you that Tong Tong is a good master. It's his luck to learn from him. You mustn't refuse. As soon as the stall owner heard this, he was afraid that Jiang Tong's parents would say no, so he hurried up to them and vowed to them. Brother Lu. When Jiang Tong's parents hear this, they see that the stall owner is also here. What's more, they don't expect that even he helps Yi Tian say good things. But they know that Brother Lu is a warm-hearted and good man. Since he said Yi Tian was a good man, there must be no mistake. As parents, the biggest worry in their hearts has always been that they are afraid that their children will go astray. However, they don't understand. What does the stall owner mean by adding good man in front of the word good man? Is it medicine or something? You are our two life-saving benefactors. We have no opinion about Tong Tong's apprenticeship. Following closely, Tong Tong's parents look at Yi Tian and say, Since you can rest assured to give me Tong Tong, then rest assured that I may be very strict with him, but I will certainly be good to him and give him a future. When Yi Tian heard this, he nodded with a smile and said with a smile. Hearing this, Tong Tong's parents immediately nodded their heads gratefully. The heart that had been a little uneasy also relaxed a lot. As parents, although they hope their children can be competitive, what they hope more is that they can live well. Let me ask you something. Did you two see the man who hit you? And did he hit you twice? At this time, Yi Tian looks at Tong Tong's parents and says in a deep voice. Really, God? How did he know that? When Yi Tian's words fall, Tong Tong's parents immediately open their eyes. Although they are in a trance after the violent impact, they still remember that there was absolutely no Yi Tian around at that time. However, since he was not there, how did he know these things? At this moment, they finally understand why the stall owner said Yi Tian was a very good man. Yes, at that time, I saw that the man who hit us was Zhou Yonghai, the eldest son of the Zhou family. In fact, I was not in a coma when I hit him for the first time. He ran out of the car to see me, and I called out his name. When he heard that, he might be afraid of me, so he ran into the car in a hurry and hit us again. Later, we didn't know. Jiang Tong's father listened to Yi Tian's words, shocked for a long time, and then slowly told the story. Hiss. When the stall owner heard this, he immediately took a breath of air conditioning and couldn't believe it. He was incredibly vicious. After knocking someone down, he ran into him for a second time. If the first time was an accident, then the second time was definitely intentional murder. Of course, what surprised him even more was that Yi Tian just met Jiang Tong's parents and judged that he got such important information. This insight is amazing, it can't help but feel incredible. This man is really damned. Hearing this, Yi Tian immediately covered his face with a layer of frost color. In his eyes, he was full of cold murders. What Zhou Yonghai has done shows that what Jiang Tong's parents suffered is not an accident, but an intentional murder. You know, since Jiang Tong's parents were still conscious at the time of the first impact, it means that if Zhou Yonghai had made an emergency call in time, the two of them would have been able to recover only after staying in the hospital for a period of time. However, Zhou Yonghai chose to ignore the lives of two people and hit the car for the second time. Just, why does Zhou Yonghai choose this kind of vicious means? At that time, he drank a lot. I remember when he got out of the car and looked at it, he smelled of wine. At this time, Jiang Tong's father pondered for a while and said slowly. I see. Hearing this, Yi Tian immediately felt that everything was clear. You know, drunken accident is a felony, which needs to be jailed. Needless to say, Zhou Yonghai bumped into two people at one time, and the nature is even worse. If found by the police, then it is not impossible to sentence him for at least 3 years, or even 7 years. I'm afraid that's when he thought of this. He found that the surroundings were empty, no one saw this scene, and his identity had been recognized by Jiang Tong's parents, so Zhou Yonghai wanted to do nothing but run people to death, and then escape the legal net. It's just that drunk driving is a mistake that shouldn't be made. If someone does something wrong, he should bear the punishment. Why should Zhou Yonghai take other people's lives to pay for his mistakes? Similarly, what's the difference between such a person and a vicious devil? Master, I want to avenge my parents. Jiang Tong heard these words, his eyes were red, 5 fingers pinched tightly, looking at Yi Tian, word by word. Don't worry, Master, since he has promised to help you make the decision, then he will take care of this matter to the end. No matter whether he is the Zhou family or the Zhao family, if someone does something wrong, he should be punished. If heaven does not punish him, I will punish him. Yi Tian pats Jiang Tong's shoulder, word by word. As he said, if he did not encounter this matter, then even if Zhou Yonghai himself was lucky, his life should not be absolute, but since he was encountered, let alone Jiang Tong was his apprentice, even if he did not have this kind of relationship, he would take charge of this kind of vicious person. Mr. Yi, the Zhou family is in Jiangcheng. It's very powerful. You can't underestimate it. You'd better think twice before you leap. After hearing this, the stall owner pondered a little, looked at Yi Tian and said slowly. Although he knows that Yi Tian is very powerful, and that kind of incredible means seems to compete with the gods, there is an old saying that 2 fists are hard to beat 4 hands. No matter how strong Yi Tian is, compared with the Zhou family, who has a big family, a big career, and can shake 3 times by stamping his feet, I'm afraid it's still a little tough. If you just rashly go to find Zhou Yonghai's bad luck and trouble, you can't be sure. It's also possible that the Zhou family will turn around. Don't worry, it's just a week's family, but it's not in my eyes. The Leaf Day hears a sound, indifferent a smile, calm way. You're kidding. He didn't even see Qingming's sect, the first sect on the mountain. What's more, it's just a Zhou family who boasts in the secular world. Take a good rest in the hospital, Tong Tong. Let's go. I'll take you to get justice for your parents. Closely following, Leaf Day toward River Pupil nodded, calm way. Well, thank you, Master. Without thinking, Jiang Tong answered immediately, and then said to his parents, Mom and Dad, have a good rest. Master and I will go to the Zhou family to ask for justice for you. Hearing this, Jiang Tong's parents' face changed greatly, and their eyes were full of confusion and uneasiness. You know, the existence of the Zhou family is no different from that of the heaven. They wake up from a coma and see their son. But now, the son wants to fight against the heaven for them. How can they be at ease? Don't worry, since I dare to take Tong Tong, I won't let him have any trouble. Yi Tianware cannot know pupil parents in the heart is worrying about what, smell speech, smile a, way. Don't worry, Mom and Dad. Master is very good. The Zhou family can't help him. I think we'll be back soon. Jiang Tong hears the sound, also takes a smile, relaxed casual way. It seems that he is not going to trouble the biggest family in Jiangcheng, but to go out for a picnic with his classmates. After that, Yi Tian and Jiang Tong walk out of the ward and out of the hospital. Brother Lu, will Tong Tong and his master be okay? Looking at the back of their departure, Jiang Tong's parents on the sickbed looked anxiously at the stall owner. They were still full of uneasiness. After all, it was the Zhou family, high above the others. For them, the Zhou family was like heaven. I don't know. The stall owner shook his head with a wry smile, but when Jiang Tong's parents were worried about the answer, the stall owner continued, however, I don't think Mr. Ye's behavior is like that kind of boaster. He said it's okay, it should be okay, and you think, how can a good man like him say that he would take Tong's life? What about adventure? When Jiang Tong's parents heard this, their hearts suddenly relaxed. Yes, if Yi Naivete is such a reckless person, then why do you need to rescue them? At the same time, after leaving the hospital, Yi Tian and Jiang Tong stop a car. According to the information they just got from the stall owner, they rush to the East Lake Tianpin Villa where the Zhou family lives. East Lake is the most beautiful lake in Jiangcheng, with beautiful scenery. It is even more expensive to live directly in villas built in scenic spots. As soon as the taxi arrived at the gate of the East Lake Tianpin Villa, it was stopped by the security guard stationed at the gate. He raised his head and pointed at them with his nostrils and said in a cold voice, "This is a private garden, and there is a grand banquet in it today. You can't enter without an appointment." It was as if he was not the security guard here, but the people living in it. Party? Hearing this, Tian glanced at the gate of the community and saw a colorful banner with several gilded words, "Warmly celebrate Mr. Zhou Yonghai's achievement of heaven and man." Heaven and man? What is this? Tian can't help but raise his eyebrows lightly when he hears the sound. He only hears about the man on the mountain. When did he come out again? But immediately, he realized that the so-called heaven and man were the names given to them by those who were able to develop their spiritual roots and master mysterious powers after the heaven and earth changed. However, God is really eye-catching, even let Zhou Yonghai, such scum, has the spirit root. Haha, I don't know what is heaven and man. No wonder, what do you little taxi drivers know? At this time, the security guard of the gate looked at Tian and Jiang Tong with a look of arrogance. Then, with a broad-minded look, he showed off, "I tell you, heaven and man are the most powerful people in the world in the future. They all have great power. Let's take Zhou Deshao as an example. What he has is an incredible wind power. When he raises his hand, the wind blade like a small knife flies out. It's so terrible that if a small knife is thrown out, the metal railing can be cut in half." Although the security guard was showing off, there was fear at the bottom of his eyes. Obviously, the goods should have witnessed Zhou Yonghai's exertion of Fenglingen's power. How powerful! Tian looks at the appearance of the security guard with a sneer in his heart, but he looks shocked and says, "Haha, that's what you didn't see when Zhou Deshao started. If you saw it, it would be more than severe. It's estimated that the urine would be scared out." When the security guard saw Tian's appearance, his face became more elated. He sneered twice. After turning his eyes, he slapped the steel railings supporting the sentry box beside him and continued to show off, "See, this kind of thick and thin steel column, with a wind knife, you can cut it in half. A knife down, cut the pillar in half. It's so powerful, isn't it like this?" Tian laughs, flicks his hand, and a wind blade flies out. In an instant, it falls on the guard box behind the security guard. He only hears a violent click. The huge guard box, in an instant, flies out by the wind blade and falls to the ground heavily. You. At the moment of this scene, the security guard's cheek was as pale as paper. He looked at Tian, and along his forehead, beads of sweat the size of soybeans came out. It looked like the whole person had just fished out of the water. Not only that, along his two trembling legs, there was light yellow water splashing over, a piece of smell. "I'm really scared to pee. It seems that you are very experienced in this matter." Tian looks at the security guard's appearance and covers his nose in disgust. After a sneer, he takes Jiang Tong and rushes to the East Lake Tianpin Villa. "Put on." The security guard looked at Tian's appearance, his legs trembled for a long time, his knees softened, and he knelt down on the ground. At this moment, he felt as if he had just wandered around the gate of hell, but when he first saw Tian, how could he think that this young man was so strong? Compared with this young man, Zhou Yonghai's little tricks are just like a child's family, which is not worth mentioning. Walking forward for a moment, just arriving at a beautiful bay area, Tian immediately saw that all kinds of long tables, white tablecloths and delicacies were on the grass. In the middle of the long table, there are a group of well-dressed and successful people. And this group of people, at this moment, are gathered together, looking at a white wooden platform in front of them, dressed in suits and shoes, keeping an inch, dressed very capable young people. Hiss! When Tian looked around, he immediately saw that the young man's hands trembled, an invisible atmosphere flew out, whistling, and landed on an apple about 4 or 5 meters away. He easily cut the apple in half. This guy seems to be Zhou Yonghai. He looks like a dog, but his heart is not as good as a beast. When Tian saw this scene, he immediately understood that the guy who was showing wind blade on the stage was Zhou Yonghai he was looking for. Boom! The appearance of this scene also made those well-dressed people under the stage immediately boil. Applause and cheers were like thunder. Everyone was shocked to look at Zhou Yonghai on the stage. The Zhou family is really blessed. It was originally the first family in Jiangcheng, but now there is a young man in heaven. It seems that the family has passed on for 100 years. No, there is hope for 1,000 years. In my opinion, the Zhou family will soon be able to walk out of Jiangcheng and become one of the top families in China with the presence of the young and the old. It's a powerful way to kill people. If it happens to you, you don't have to cut it in half all at once. Immediately, the deafening noise rang out, and everyone was full of admiration, as if, in their eyes, Zhou Yonghai had become an omnipotent master who could pass on the Zhou family for thousands of generations. Yi Tian's face was full of sneers when he listened to the sound of flattery. As far as he could see, Zhou Yonghai was a little smart. After activating Fenglingen, he found out the way of luck, so he could play a wind blade, but it also belonged to the category of instinctive operation, which was nothing at all. If this kind of means can be regarded as the giant of Optimus, then he is an absolute immortal, and Zhang Tong is a little immortal. What's more, the most taboo thing on the road of cultivation is to be blindly flattered. You know, not everyone in the world is able to understand his mind and ignore other people's flattery. When he was in the square-inch spiritual realm, he knew and saw how much pride he had been killed by people. Looking at the elated look on Zhou Yonghai's face, it's obvious that this guy is not the kind of master who cannot get lost in flattery. Haha, it's just the kung fu of a three-legged cat. It's hard for you to find a second person who is so powerful. I think you are really shallow-minded. You can't even tell what is arrogant, what is scum and scum. Read here. Yi Tian immediately looked at the stage as complacent Zhou Yonghai, disdain sneer. Coax. Yi Tian's voice is really too disharmonious. At the moment of falling, the crowd immediately turned around, and their eyes fell on him. At the same time, there were bursts of roar. You know, the Zhou family is the largest family in Jiangcheng. Who dares not sell the Zhou family a little face? In addition to being surprised by Zhou Yonghai's methods, 60% of the praise they just made was due to the face of the Zhou family. But now, the young man didn't pay attention to Zhou Yonghai. He even said that Zhou Yonghai's powerful and arrogant method was just the kung fu of a three-legged cat. That's all. In his words, he even said that Zhou Yonghai was scum and scum. All this is a slap in the face of Zhou Yonghai and the Zhou family. In particular, it's time for the Zhou family to enjoy the scenery. When Yi Tian comes here, it's not the same as giving someone a green hat when they get married, giving someone a big red envelope when they die, and giving someone a thin coffin when they give birth to a child. However, they also think that the person who dares to speak like this may be the son of one of the families, but after looking at him, they find that Yi Tian is very angry. Especially listening to the accent, he doesn't sound like a person from Jiangcheng. Who are you calling scum and scum? At this time, Zhou Yonghai, who is being flattered on the stage, is also furious when he hears Yi Tian's words. If he wants to spit fire, his eyes are staring at him, every word, he says angrily. Who do you think I can call scum and scum besides you? Yi Tian chuckled and shrugged his shoulders. He looked calm and faint. After a word, the crowd became more and more noisy. In his eyes, he was even more perplexed. He didn't understand what hatred Yi Tian had with Zhou Yonghai. He insulted him again and again. You want to die. Zhou Yonghai was furious. He clenched his teeth, shook his hand, and roared towards Yi Tian. This guy, with Ling Zhen, is even more crazy. In public, they dare to kill people. What a shame. Yi Tian sees this, Cantha slightly adraw, a white evil spirit, suddenly climb up pang. This scum, heaven does not punish, he will punish. Good. Higher, you have done a good job. That's what you want. If you dare to tease my Zhou family, you want him to pay the price of bleeding. What's more, when Zhou Yonghai attacked Yi Tian with his wind blade, the middle-aged man with gold glasses and gentle look stood beside him. At this moment, his face showed a ferocious color. He looked at Yi Tian, gritted his teeth and roared every word. The upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked. With such Lao Tzu, it's no wonder that Zhou Yonghai still drives after he is drunk. After driving and bumping people, the first thing he thinks about is not to call the hospital emergency call, but to choose to drive and hit the injured again, trying to kill others. Vicious and cruel, it is the tradition of La Shizi Zhou family, from Sun to Laozi. When Yi Tian heard this, the evil spirit in his eyes suddenly became stronger. He always paid attention to his wife and children's misfortune, but now, what Zhou Yonghai and his son have done has stepped on his bottom line. Moreover, it can be said that they are not stepping on his bottom line, but dancing wildly on his bottom line. If such people let go easily, it would not be too cheap for them. This young man is going to have bad luck today. Hearing the middle-aged people's words, the guests around them, after a short period of confusion, looked at Yi Tian with sympathy and ridicule. Sympathy is the experience of sympathy and Yi Tian. When you are young, you are going to die here, and you have a good life. How can you not be worthy of sympathy if you die young? As for ridicule, it's ridicule at Yi Tian's stupidity. In Zhangcheng, it's not good to provoke anyone, but to provoke the Zhou family. It's not to kill yourself. What is it? You want to kill me? With your little breeze? Just you? By your Zhou family? It seems that your Zhou family is not only a nest of snakes and mice, a scum of father, but also two idiots to the letter. Yi Tian looked at the scene before him. After a smile, he gently waved his hand. In an instant, along his 5 fingers, a huge wind blade suddenly condensed and appeared in front of him. This is God. He is also heaven and man. What's more, how can his wind blade be so much bigger than Zhou Yonghai? Is there a difference between heaven and man? With such a big wind blade, he has to be much more powerful than Zhou Yonghai. As soon as the wind blade appeared, all the guests around them were boiling in a flash. Everyone's expression was dull. No one among them thought that Yi Tian could use the wind blade. Moreover, the wind blade was so huge that it was incredible. Compared with Yi Tian's wind blade, Zhou Yonghai's wind blade looks just like his son and father. No, it should be said that it's his grandson and grandfather. Moreover, his grandson is still a baby in his arms. Che! At this time, Zhou Yonghai's wind blade had hit Yi Tian's giant wind blade. When they touched each other, the wind blade was just a touch, just like an embroidery needle. It didn't even beat a few times. Then it fell to the ground and disappeared. Is this the so-called heaven and man? Who is high in the sky? Seeing this, Yi Tian sweeps his eyes toward Zhou Yonghai. In his eyes, he is full of playful color and light way. You. When Zhou Yonghai heard this, he looked at Yi Tian in a hurry. His hands were shaking wildly, and his legs were shaking like chaff. He thought that he should be one of the most powerful people in the world with the secret art of wind blade, but now, compared with Yi Tian, he found that he was too weak to mention. In front of Yi Tian, a really powerful man, it seemed that he was not different from the so-called ordinary people at all. Put on. Almost at the same time, the head of the Zhou family also fell on his knees and knelt down directly on the ground. Without saying a word, he knocked his head 3 times toward Yi Tian. Zhou Fu was really able to bend and stretch. No wonder he took the Zhou family to the throne of the first family in Zhangcheng. Looking at this scene, the guests around were shocked and even more shocked. Although Yi Tian's powerful performance has reached an incredible level, Zhou Fu was the head of the largest family in Zhangcheng. He can't help but admire him for making such a concession. Master, you have a large number of adults. Please hold your hand high. We are the first offenders, and we Zhou family have no grudge against you. Please forgive our father and son. At the same time, Zhou Fu kowtowed to Yi Tian several times, and then said, as long as you are willing to let go of our father and son, we will give you whatever conditions you want. Even if you want this villa, there is no problem. I can also let High Air worship you as a teacher and treat you like a father from now on. No injustice, no hatred. Do you think that if there is no injustice and no hatred, I will do so? Do you want him to ask himself if he is worthy of learning from me? Why don't you pee to see if you have the qualification? When Yi Tian heard Zhou Fu's words, he shook his head and sneered, are you kidding? Not to mention Zhou Fu's talent, he is just a very ordinary person. He can't be compared with Jiang Tong. Even if he is Jiang Tong's genius, he always looks at his heart. This kind of scum really doesn't deserve to be his disciple. Master, I don't know where we have offended you. You tell us that we are willing to change and compensate. Zhou Fu hears the sound and realizes that Yi Tian doesn't seem to be aiming at their father and son, but for another reason. He asks in a hurry. You don't know what your precious son has done recently? Don't tell me that everything he does has nothing to do with you. Yi Tian looked down at Zhou Fu, word by word, light way. As far as he can see today, I'm afraid that 90% of the reason why the witness was bribed was because of Zhou Fu's leading role. But now, at the moment, Zhou Fu shows that he doesn't know what he's doing wrong. He only tells us one thing, that is, Jiang Tong's parents are not alone. There are so many similar things happening that Zhou Fu doesn't know what he's talking about. Recent events, you mean? How can I check? When Zhou Fu heard Yi Tian's words, he immediately raised his head in horror and looked at Yi Tian in disbelief. He followed him closely and looked at Jiang Tong behind him. He lost his voice and said, Are you Jiang Tong, the child of that couple? You haven't all broken your head. You know who he is? Hearing this, Yi Tian looked at Zhou Fu calmly and said calmly, Yes, he is Jiang Tong, my real apprentice. Jiang Tong is the apprentice of this strong man. It's all over. When Zhou Fu heard the sound, the whole body was shocked at this moment. You know, it's very common for master to stand up for his apprentice all the time. It's reasonable for Yi Tian to help Jiang Tong stand up for justice. However, what he couldn't understand was that when he dealt with the bribed witness, he investigated the situation of the 3 members of the Jiang family. They were all ordinary people, nothing special. Jiang Tong was just a child in junior high school. But this is the child in junior high school. Now, how can such a powerful master come out? But there is no doubt that as long as the strong man in front of him wants to stand up for Jiang Tong, and he doesn't want to be kind, then his father and son's good days will definitely come to an end. I'm sorry, it's because we don't know Taishan, and we don't know that this little brother is your apprentice. That's why we were blinded by lard and made such a stupid thing. You can rest assured that I will punish higher heavily. Besides, all the expenses for his parents' medical treatment are borne by our Zhou family. Moreover, we will give them enough compensation, 10 million yuan. In addition, this villa will give you compensation. I don't know if it's enough. After shaking, Zhou Fu got up from the ground and kicked Zhou Yonghai hard. After kicking him to the ground, he looked at Yi Tian and said, Look, how about this? 10 million yuan for a car accident, plus a villa, and it's the best villa like East Lake Tianpin Villa. Zhou Fu's plan is to spend money to eliminate disaster, and it's still a kind of bleeding money to eliminate disaster. When all the guests around heard this, they immediately gasped for air. Although they knew that Zhou Fu was spending money on his life, they could not help admiring him. After all, not everyone can do such a thing. After all, 10 million is definitely not a small number, let alone the East Lake Tianpin Villa. Even if the house price in Jiangcheng can't be compared with that in the capital, Shanghai and Jiangnan, it will definitely exceed 100 million. Hundreds of millions of wealth, in exchange for 2 lives, such a business, as long as it is an individual, there is absolutely no way to refuse. Even if Yi Tian's performance is indeed a peerless strong man, he will be moved by it. The turret is around your neck, so you think of it as compensation. What have you done? However, to everyone's surprise, after hearing Zhou Fu's big compensation, Yi Tian's face was full of ridicule. For him, a picture of tens of millions of cash and hundreds of millions of villas was just like floating clouds in mud, which was not enough for Tao. Unrighteous and rich and expensive, and I like floating clouds. This sentence has always been Yi Tian's code of conduct. No matter what he does, it's the same. He can exchange benefits by doing unjust things, let alone 100 million. Even if it's 100 million or 10 billion, he doesn't even have the interest to look down. And, as he said, what have Zhou Fu and Zhou Yonghai done for a long time? In a car accident, I don't want to save people. Instead, I run into it and want to kill people. Such scum is so vicious that it's worse than animals. Now, although their attitude of apology seems to be sincere, in fact, it is not forced by his power. But if he is just a trivial ordinary person, will Zhou Fu and Zhou Yonghai give compensation and apologize? I'm afraid that in that case, I don't even have to think about it. Even, waiting for him, it's also death. What could have been a simple medical treatment has become what it is now. Isn't it all because of the viciousness and apathy of Zhou Fu and Zhou Yonghai's father and son? If such a person makes a mistake in doing such a thing, he can let everything pass if he just loses some money. Then, what is the principle of heaven? Where is justice? Moreover, according to their performance at the moment, the two of them did not repent at all. They just thought that they were unlucky and had something stronger than them. After they took the money and left the house, they would not repent. Things like Jiang Tong's parents would definitely happen again. God may not punish such people. But he, Yi Tian, will. No, he refused. As soon as Yi Tian's words came out, all the guests in the room were stupid. Everyone was staring at Yi Tian, and could hardly believe his ears. 10 million cash, the value of hundreds of millions of villas, such wealth, even these people are attracted, and feel that, let alone buy 2 lives, even if it is to buy 100 lives, can be said to be more than enough. But it happened that such a generous compensation would be rejected by Yi Tian. Don't you want a house? Then I can take all the cash to compensate you. If you don't want cash, antiques, calligraphy and paintings, jade, gold, anything as long as you are willing to let go of our father and son, whatever you want, just say, I will try my best to satisfy you. Let alone these people, even Zhou Fu was confused and his heart sank suddenly. He didn't expect that there would be Yi Tian who didn't love money in this world. But this scene gave him a very bad premonition that since the other party didn't want money, what the other party wanted must be more precious than money. What do I want? The Leaf Day hears speech, raises eyebrow a smile, condescending saw weak rich one eye, light way, what I want, very simple, I want a fair. Fair. Zhou Fu's heart suddenly sank after a word fell. The bad feeling was so strong that it was beyond compare. It was not only him, but also Zhou Yonghai, the initiator. At this moment, his body was shaking more like a pendulum, and he seemed to be able to turn his eyes and faint at any time. What is justice? Justice is killing people to pay for their lives, debt to pay for money, a report also a report. There is no doubt that what Yi Tian wants to do is to make him pay for what he did wrong. Jiang Tong, it's your parents who were injured. Tell me, what do you want him to pay? At this time, Yi Tian turned his head and looked at Jiang Tong. Master, what I want is also very simple. He hit my mother twice with his car. I want him to be hit twice with his car. I want him to have a good feeling about what it is like and how desperate he is after being hit. Jiang Tong heard the sound, 5 fingers pinched tightly, silent for a long time, gave his own answer. Good, fair, fair. Yi Tian nodded slightly, looked at Zhou Yonghai immediately, and said faintly, since my apprentice has said that, then, your punishment is to be hit twice by a car. As for whether you are dead or alive, it depends on whether you are lucky like Tong Tong's parents or yourself. Hit the car twice. When Zhou Yonghai heard this, he was directly stupid. Although he now has the ability to use the wind blade and achieve heaven and man, he is nothing but flesh and blood after all. If he is hit twice by a car, how can he survive? Master, I know I'm wrong. Please forgive me this time. I swear that I will never dare. I confess, I apologize and I compensate please, for heaven's sake, don't hit me twice with your car. I don't want to die. Without any hesitation, Zhou Yonghai immediately prostrate on his knees and kowtow to Yi Tian, hoping to get understanding with this humble attitude. Do you have the face to say that heaven has the virtue to live a good life? Do you deserve it? When Yi Tian heard this, he laughed angrily. Things fall on their own head, they began to say that God has the virtue of a good life, did not fall on their own head, they do not hesitate to drive to bump into others twice, and it is obvious that they want to bump others to death. What is rubbish? Such a person, no doubt, is a piece of rubbish. Aye. Zhou Yonghai's lips moved, but he could not say a word. He knows that Yi Tian's heart has been killed now. What he says is superfluous. What is waiting for him will be a dead end. Without any hesitation, he struggled to get up in a hurry and was about to rush into the crowd to escape the punishment given by Yi Tian. Want to escape? Do you think you can escape? When Yi Tian saw this, he raised his eyebrows and laughed indifferently. With a slight move, the secret technique of Earth Avalanche worked. In an instant, he suddenly raised along the ground in front of Zhou Yonghai's feet and tripped him to the ground. Shwa! Immediately after that, Tian turns around and locks his eyes on a car not far away. He takes a picture of the heavy car. It flies horizontally. It's as fast as galloping on a high speed. Immediately, he bumps heavily into Zhou Yonghai, who falls to the ground and looks like a drowning dog. Bang! With a terrible loud noise, Zhou Yonghai's body immediately flew up like a broken kite. Along his mouth, there was blood like rain, splashing out. And that pale face, at this moment, is directly become like paper, and, along the eyes, the look is gradually lax. God! This scene is not only terrifying, but also treacherous. With a wave of his hand, a car with a weight of tons soars up, making people feel that Yi Tian is no different from the legendary gods. One more time. And at this time, Yi Tian light mouth, as if in charge of the world penalty god, word by word, indifferent, ruthless way. Master, please, let higher go. We'll give you what you want. When Zhou Fu heard the sound, he was trembling all over. He knelt down on the ground and climbed up to Zhou Yonghai. He kowtowed to Yi Tian crazily and cried. He hoped that Yi Tian would raise his hand and not give Zhou Yonghai a second time. You know, I'm afraid Zhou Yonghai's half foot has gone to the gate of death. Judging from the blood in his mouth and the depression in his chest, we can see that all the bones in his body have been fractured, and his heart and lung have been severely shaken. Even in the present state, it's unknown whether he can survive if he goes to the hospital. But there's no doubt that if he comes to the world for a second time, I'm afraid that even if he comes to the world, he won't be able to save him. It must be a dead end waiting for him. Give him a break? Then I ask you, when he was drunk, he hit the Zhang family and his wife, got out of the car to check the situation, and was recognized by the other party. Why did he drive into them for the second time? Don't tell me that he did it for the sake of the Zhang family and his wife. He was raising his hand to make a living for them. Yuzhou family father and son can be one, so why can't I be two? What you've imposed on others, do it on you again? Hearing this, Yi Tian looks up and sneers. His eyes are full of contempt and disgust. What? Zhou Yonghai once hit and injured a person in a drunken driving accident. After he was recognized by the other party, he got on the bus in a hurry and drove into the other party again? Yi Tian's words fall down, and those guests who were scared by this scene and were full of panic immediately show the color of shock in their eyes and shout. At this moment, they finally understand why Yi Tian scolds Zhou Yonghai for being a beast and a scum, because Zhou Yonghai's actions are not as good as pigs and dogs, ignoring human life to the extreme. If this is not scum, then what is scum in this world? At the same time, they finally understand why Yi Tian insists on hitting Zhou Yonghai twice with his car. The reason is very simple. He wants to return the news to Zhou Yonghai, so that Zhou Yonghai can understand what it means not to do to others what he doesn't want to do, and what it means to repay him. Please, I just have this son. If I don't have him, I really don't know what I should do. Please, let him go. As long as you are willing to let him go, let me do anything. Zhou Fu repeatedly kowtows, pleads in tears, hoping to move Yi Tian with his father and son's affection. Your son is a son? Is Tong Tong's parents not parents? Can he find a second parent after his parents' death? Hearing this, Yi Tian looked at Zhou Fu with an indifferent smile, and then said faintly, it's you who sent the witness to perjury and helped Zhou Yonghai hide the evidence, isn't it? As he said, when Zhou Yonghai bumped into Zhang Tong's parents for the second time, how could he not have thought that they might be other people's parents and the pillar of other people's family? He would not only kill two people, but also destroy a family. Aye. Zhou Fu heard the sound, and his eyes were full of panic. It's the father's fault that the son doesn't teach. If you teach him earlier, let him understand what's right and wrong, what's good and evil in this world, how can things come to today's situation? What's more, do you think I'll let you go if you do something for the tiger? Seeing this, Yi Tian immediately confirmed that Zhou Fu was the guy who helped Zhou Yonghai bribe the witness to retract his confession. He immediately gave a cold smile, and then said, since you don't want to get out of the way, it's so simple. Come and feel what it's like to be hit by a car. As he said, the reason why Zhou Yonghai is so vicious is not only his nature, but also Zhou Fu's indulgence. No matter what Zhou Yonghai has done wrong, Zhou Fu goes to help him wipe his ass regardless of right and wrong. These actions seem to love his son, but in fact, this kind of doting is intensifying, which makes Zhou Yonghai feel that no matter what evil he does, he can easily get rid of it. But unfortunately, this time, Zhou Yonghai met him. This time, this guy can no longer get rid of the responsibility. Similarly, the culprit is Zhou Yonghai, and Zhou Fu is an accomplice. He has no reason to punish Zhou Yonghai instead of Zhou Fu. Bang! In a flash, Yi Tian's hand moved gently, and the car roared forward and hit Zhou Fu heavily. With a loud noise, Zhou Fu's body, like a paperman, flew up high, and at the same time, there was more blood in his mouth. After landing, after rolling for 100 laps, he hit a pile of bamboo heavily, but the severe pain was over. It's about turning his eyes and falling into a coma. Second. After this attack, Yi Tian didn't hesitate. When he waved his hand again, the car roared forward and rushed out. Like a swinging hammer, it pounded heavily on Zhou Yonghai's body. With a terrible dull sound of bang, people immediately heard click click. There was a crisp noise in the room. After that, Zhou Yonghai rolled in mid-air and hit the ground heavily. His body was convulsed violently and fluctuated. Finally, his mouth suddenly opened. Along his mouth, blood splashed, and there were pieces of pink debris. It is obvious that in this terrible impact, Zhou Yonghai's viscera have been bumped into a paste. Such injuries, not to mention that he is heaven, even the king of heaven, there is no possibility of rebirth, only in this terrible pain, feel the slow flow of life, and die. It's not time to report the murderer who will be killed forever. Yi Tian looks at Zhou Yonghai's appearance, the corner of his mouth smiles coldly, word by word, light way. It's not a good thing to kill people, but to kill Zhou Yonghai's rubbish, he really can't bear the slightest psychological burden. Such a person will not really repent. If he keeps him, he will only create more sins in this world. Let him die in the perception of the evil consequences of his own creation, is the best end result of such scum. Tong Tong, let's go. All over, Leaf Day indifference toward the four sides after scanning, toward the side has looked silly. Jiang Tong waved, light way. Jiang Tong hears the news and trots to Yi Tian's side. Immediately, the master and his disciples stride toward the outside of the villa area, leaving behind a crowd of big-eyed and small-eyed guests. When the matter is over, brush your clothes and let the gratitude and resentment go away. This is the real immortal happy love and hatred, this is the real strong man. Looking at Yi Tian's back, a group of guests murmured, in addition to fear, there is a kind of admiration. And in addition to these, in their hearts, there is a strong shock. Today, the confrontation between Yi Tian and Zhou Yonghai makes them suddenly realize that this era has changed. Although money and power are important, they seem to be less important than before. The most important thing is power, real and pure power. If you don't have strong power, you will be like a weed in the future. For example, Zhou Fu and Zhou Yonghai, the father and son who once dominated Jiangcheng, even though they were called the first family of Jiangcheng, were waiting for them in front of such a strong man with absolute power, but they were still like fish on the chopping board and were slaughtered without any resistance. Pay attention to these people, find heaven and man, make them for our use. Only this kind of people with strong power can protect our safety. Not only that, they also began to be moved to look for strong men like Yi Tian to replace the past bodyguards to protect their own safety. After all, in the face of such a powerful force, the role that guns can play has been minimal. What kind of bullets can block the bombardment of a car? This era has changed, everyone must be familiar with this and the past the same but strange world. A moment later, Yi Tian and Jiang Tong turn back to the hospital and appear in front of Jiang Tong's parents' bed. Tong Tong, didn't you find the Zhou family? Seeing that Yi Tian and Jiang Tong are back so soon, Jiang Tong's parents can't help sighing a sigh of relief when they look at each other. They think that the Zhou family is so powerful and must be heavily guarded. In such a short time, Yi Tian's strength and means are so powerful that he should not be able to do anything. Dad, Mom, Shifu, he's already avenged for you. He took the car and hit that Zhou Yonghai twice. Jiang Tong heard this, immediately shook his head, skillful gestures, said the whole story of the matter, and then, looked at Yi Tian with adoration. With a wave of your hand, you can control a car and hit a person heavily. Jiang Tong's parents listened to Jiang Tong's words, their ears are buzzing, and their bodies are shivering. Although they know that Yi Tian is very strong, they didn't expect that Yi Tian is so strong that it's unimaginable. It's not human, it's a god. But they know that although Jiang Tong is rebellious, he never lies in front of them. What he tells them must be the truth. Zhou family, it's over in Jiangchun from now on. You can heal in the hospital. As for other things, you don't have to worry. No one dares to trouble me. Yi Tian looks at Jiang Tong's parents' creepy and trembling appearance and says with a smile. The guests who went to the banquet of the Zhou family were all smart people, and they were all powerful people. This kind of people cherished their lives most. After seeing his means, even if they lent them 100 courage, they did not dare to tell others what happened at that time, so as not to let Yi Tian know what happened to the Zhou family again in their body. They don't feel that their small body is much stronger than Zhou Yonghai's, and they can withstand the 2 impacts of the car. In this case, no matter who asked, they would keep a secret for themselves, as if they didn't see anything and didn't know what happened. There is no monitoring and no witness in that place. Naturally, all this will become a headless case, which is the same as what Zhou Fu did to Jiang Tong's parents. Thank you, thank you. Jiang Tong's parents are trembling and thanking Yi Tian. They know that Yi Tian doesn't have to do this. He does it just to help them get back a piece of justice. I said, you don't have to thank me. All this is just a little help. Yi Tian smiles, waves his hand and looks at Jiang Tong's parents. He says, the matter has been solved. I still want to ask you whether you want Tong Tong to worship me as a teacher. If you want, after you recover, you can take him to Nanhai to find me. Later, he can go to school there and practice with me. Of course, if you want to stay with him, I can go to Nanhai. Nanhai provides you with a job and a home. Since he wants to accept the apprentice, naturally, he has to consider the apprentice's parents. Yi Tian is not the kind of friar who is inferior in everything. He is not the kind of cultivation monster who cuts off 7 emotions and 6 desires. Therefore, he will not ignore Jiang Tong's parents' opinions and take him to Nanhai to practice with him. Dad, Mom, I'm willing to follow my master to Nanhai to practice. Hearing this, Jiang Tong immediately looks forward to his parents and gives his own answer. Hearing this, Jiang Tong's parents looked at each other. After a long hesitation, they nodded and said, okay, we are willing to go to the South China Sea. They know that Jiang Tong's ability to worship such a strange person as Yi Tian is definitely a chance for him to cultivate in his 8th life. If he misses it, it will be a lifelong regret. Of course, what's more important is that Yi Tian's character makes them understand that Jiang Tong follows Yi Tian's cultivation. No matter how high he will achieve in the future, he will not make mistakes or go astray in character at least. Well, that's settled. You can have a good rest. When you are healthy, you can take Jiang Tong to Nanhai to find me. Yi Tian smell speech, smile to nod, after admonishing 2, then leave. Jiang Tong naturally ran out and sent Yi Tian away. Thank you, master. After going out of the hospital, Jiang Tong immediately kneels on the ground and kowtows to Yi Tian respectfully. His eyes are full of gratitude. He knew that without Yi Tian's help, even if he had escaped the police's search before, as long as he used the cash and gold bars, he would be exposed. At that time, a prison disaster would be inevitable, and his parents, I'm afraid, would die in the hospital because they couldn't get medical treatment. Moreover, even to say the least, he was lucky that the police didn't find him and asked him to take the money to cure his parents. However, based on the actions of the Zhou family, after learning that his parents recovered, how could he give up and definitely choose to kill again? Until then, what their family had to face was still a robbery. Remember how you feel now and think about what you should do if you encounter similar things in the future. Yi Tian doesn't dodge anything. After receiving the big gifts from Jiang Tong, he looks at Jiang Tong and says in a warm voice. If the parents want their children not only to have a bright future, but also to be on the right path, then what the master wants is that no matter what kind of cultivation the apprentice can achieve in the future and what height he can reach, he must have a heart of self-respect and kindness, which is even more important than cultivation. I remember that when I get stronger and encounter similar things, I will do the same as you, master. Jiang Tong hears the sound and nods to Yi Tiangong without thinking. Although he is very young, when his parents are lying in the hospital bed, he can do nothing. He has no way to avenge his parents. His feeling is very desperate. However, his perception is very clear. He also does not want similar things to happen to others in the future. If something similar happens to him, he also hopes that he can manage it like Tian and give justice to the world. Good. Go back and take care of your parents. I'll wait for you in Nanhai. Tian chuckles and pulls Jiang Tong up from the ground. He reaches for his shoulder and pats him. Wen Sheng says. After a word, Tian turns around and goes to a secluded place. Then Jiang Tong sees a streamer rising and disappearing above the clouds. Master, don't worry, I will be like you. Jiang Tong looked at the streamer, his eyes full of envy, but more, it is a strong worship. Finally, he pinched his fingers tightly, murmured, turned and ran to the hospital. 3 days later, Tian's figure appeared in the South China Sea. There is no need to see anything in the South China Sea at all. Just through the news he saw on his mobile phone in the past 3 days, it has been completely confirmed that the world has indeed changed. It is no longer the same as the past. A brand new world has come, and practitioners will emerge again in the secular world. In particular, when he walked into Nanhai University and saw the scene in the square at the gate of the university, he confirmed what he thought. In the campus, 2 students are showing their spiritual roots in the crowd. One raises his hand and throws up a small fireball. The other waves at the flowerbed fountain, and a water ball flies out and collides with the fire. Then countless brilliant white steam rises and turns into a small cloud, which immediately attracts countless people. Cheers. This scene, let Tian suddenly feel, he walked into, as if is no longer the university, but the former green blessed land. Heaven and earth have changed, and the world is also changing. Practitioners will no longer live in a secret place unknown to the world, but become a member of the crowd. But all this not only means that a glorious world of cultivation will reappear, but also means that the darkness will be closer and closer. Because the so-called heaven and man with spiritual roots are the best carrier for those who come. Tian, you're back. Just as Tian was looking at the people with spiritual roots and showing their skills, a sudden joy came from the crowd. Then Shi Xiongxing rushed over and punched Qin Hao in the chest. He said with a smile, "You are so smart in school. You can't see anyone in the campus. Where have you been recently? This is not a trip to Yinjing, and then gave me a few days off. I went to the frontier to play for a few days." Hearing this, Tian explains with a smile. Then he looks at the heavenly people in the crowd. Immediately, Chao Shixiang looks up and down. He finds that this guy has awakened the native Lingzhen. He pretends not to notice and says with a smile, "How are you? Are you a heavenly man? Have you heard about heaven and man?" When Shi Xiong heard this, his eyes lit up immediately, and he stamped his feet gently toward the ground. Along the ground, a tiny crack suddenly burst open. Next to him, there was a little bit of earthy yellow smell, which rose from the earth and formed a small yellow shield in front of him. Unite the earth and turn it into a shield. Tian sees Shi Xiong's methods, his eyes slightly change, showing his appreciation. It seems that during his absence from school, Shi Xiong has been practicing well, and has already possessed the ability to manipulate 2 yuan. However, this is not a good thing for Shi Xiong. The reason is very simple, because Shi Xiong's practice is pure martial arts. If he wants to practice these techniques, he will be half-hearted. You know, the most taboo thing about cultivation is to be greedy and chewy. If you know something about everything, you may not be proficient in everything. How's it going? Is it powerful? Shixiang Wernou these, in front of Tian exposed this hand, complacent, full face of the expression of merit, to Tian Dao. That's right, but I suggest you stop focusing on it and continue the secret method I taught you. It's the right way to go along with what I taught you. Tian nodded with a smile, and then advised in a deep voice. As far as he can see, although Shi Xiong wakes up to Tu Ling Zhen, his Tu Lingden's power is very ordinary and only belongs to ordinary qualification. It's far inferior to his pure martial arts. If he turns to practicing martial arts now, he will be lucky to be able to achieve the golden elixir realm with the help of his own Emperor Dan in the future. But with his aptitude, if he goes along with the pure martial arts, he can at least reach the state of immaculate body, which is equivalent to the state of Huaying, and can be called an old monster. Really? You don't envy me because you haven't become heaven and man, so you don't want me to practice, do you? I see the saying on the internet, but I say that it is the general trend to become heaven and man in the future, and it is the one who leads the world trend. How can you make me give up my qualification to become heaven and man? Hearing this, Xiong widened his eyes and scratched his head. He looked at Yi Tianxuan in disbelief and asked. Today's network world, and the real world, because of the emergence of heaven and man, have been extremely noisy. How to manage heaven and man has become a big problem in front of everyone. However, there is no doubt that everyone agrees that heaven and man are the direction of human evolution, and becoming heaven and man is the trend of the future. If you just let him give up to become heaven and man, it's not what Yi Tian said, it's what others said. He's afraid that he didn't hit each other in the face. Do you believe me, or do you believe the words on the internet? Do you think I'll pit you? Yi Tian raises eyebrow a smile, looking at Xiong to smile to recite away. Well, I'll listen to you. It's no big deal to break heaven and man. As for the small flames they made, I can kill 10 with one blow. Hearing this, Xiong touched his nose, then nodded his head with a smile. He recognized Yi Tian's words and decided not to waste so much effort on it. Compared with those words on the internet, he believes in Yi Tian more. After all, as early as this Lashizi Tianren had not appeared in the crowd, Yi Tian had already shown the terrible power, and that kind of power, he felt that it was no worse than these so-called Tianren. Since Yi Tian said that it was better for him to continue to practice the heaven god's creation formula than to practice the Lashizi's heaven and man skill, then he would listen to Yi Tian. Believe me, continue to practice according to what I have given you. In the future, don't say that one blow will extinguish 10 regiments of fire, even if it is 1,000 regiments. Hearing this, Yi Tian patted Xiong on the shoulder and vowed. Well, I'll listen to you. If I can't put out 100 small fires with one punch in the future, I'll settle with you. Xiong nodded with a smile, then joked. Yi Tian smiles and shakes his head. In time, he really comes into contact with the world of cultivation. When more and more people appear on that day, Xiong will understand what a wise choice he made today. Yi Tian, who do you think is Xiaohua? Don't think you don't know who you are when you are in the limelight recently. I tell you, the times have changed now. It's not a trend. It's a powerful thing. It's this. But almost at this time, along the crowd, the student who was performing Fireball looked at Yi Tian, immediately squeezed out of the crowd, strode to Yi Tian's body, and stared at his eyes. After a deep voice, his hand suddenly opened. With a boom, there were many swaying flames in his fingers. Yang Fei, I advise you that you'd better put out your little fire, which can only light people's cigarettes. Stay away from me, or you will regret it. Yi Tian sees this young man's appearance, raises eyebrow light a smile, not servile indifferent. A Yang Fei, who used to be good friends with Niu Su, belongs to the kind of fox friends who work together. When he started to clean up Niu Su, he heard from Xiong that Yang Fei was talking at school about looking for opportunities to help Niu Su get revenge. But later, Niu Su kidnapped the cicada and stepped on his bottom line. After being killed by him, Yang Fei counseled him. He didn't dare to say anything and hid himself. Now, this guy has come out again. Obviously, he feels that he has become a heaven and man and can control fire. From then on, he has become the group of people who control the world. Therefore, he should show his prestige in front of him and let out all the grievances he endured in the past. Regret? Ha ha ha, how do you want me to regret it? Don't think I didn't hear you two just now. You tell me, why don't you let Xiong practice his skills after he became heaven and man? Is it because you didn't become heaven and man, so you are jealous and don't want your good brother to be better than you? When Yang Fei heard Yi Tian's words, he could not help but step back. But when Yu Guang saw the fire in his hand, he immediately took a big step forward, looked at Yi Tian and said in a loud voice. Yang Fei, take care of your mouth. You don't know anything. Don't spray manure there. When Xiong heard this, he was immediately angry. He stared at Yang Fei's eyes and cheered angrily. Xiong, I'm talking for you. How dare you scold me? Yang Fei sneered coldly, then asked, That I ask you, you tell me, why does he not let you practice the art of heaven and man, let you continue to practice boxing? I'll go, really? Now there are people who ask others not to practice the art of heaven and man? I heard right. Heaven and man are the mainstream of the future. They are absolutely the masters of the world. How can anyone not let others practice? Is this really a good brother? I think it's plastic, brother. You don't talk nonsense. Tian is not that kind of small-bellied person. I believe he certainly won't harm Xiong. A language falls, the students around immediately babble up, look at Tian's eyes, full of doubt. Of course, some students choose to believe in Tian's character and defend him. When Xiong heard the speech, he was also a little gagged for a while. Although he believes in Tian and knows that Tian never does these things because of jealousy, now everyone thinks that heaven and man are the people who will stand at the top of the pyramid in the future. It's really strange that Tian won't let him practice. Do you want to know the answer? Tian sees this, indifferent smile, useless shrug, looking at young Fei, calm way, very simple, because you are too weak.